Well, hello and welcome to the weekly Inside the Lab Q&A show. I'm your host here, Terrence, and for today's topic or for today's discussion, we are discussing the most or the core, right? The core component or the overall core foundation of one's PC. That being more specifically your motherboard. So a lot of interesting things to talk about and discuss here that we're going to cover throughout the duration of this live show. And I just want to take a moment to greet our replay viewers because we do leave our live streams up as they are. So shout out to our replay viewers. And if you're a replay viewer, I always welcome you to tell me down in the comment section below. And at any point, if you have any questions about the topic at hand or anything we discuss throughout the duration of the live show, do feel free to leave a timestamp in your comment down in the basement or near the basement. That's what we call the description box around here in this community. But I'm excited to be here. It is a holiday here in the States as we are celebrating fathers of all different backgrounds and from all walks of life. So if you are a father, or of course you have a father, and you have a relationship with that with your father, happy Father's Day to you and to them, and to all the dads out there in the world. So with that out of the way, again, I just want to reiterate today's theme or today's discussion, and that is understanding your motherboard. And this is applicable for, regardless of where you are at in the buying process. That's understanding your motherboard before, right? Before or even after buying it, right? So that that could mean you're in a position to where you are a DIY builder yourself and you plan on, assembling your system, or you are hiring somebody to do it for you. So, and one thing I always preach that regardless of where where you fall in there in between those two categories, it's always good to at least familiarize yourself with the process, understand what goes in, with the process of, assembling a machine or building a gaming PC. Again, that's if you, regardless if you are having somebody build it for you, and obviously if you are building it yourself, you would have likely already done a fair amount of research into not just your motherboard being the core component that it is, or what you will hear me refer to it throughout the duration of this live stream, the core component of your system. So let me jump right over into the chat really fast now that we kind of got a quick overview of what today's topic or theme will fall under, or what we're going to talk about. And again, this is an interactive live stream, so of course, feel free to bombard us with your, any questions you may have, sharing some of your victories, some of your losses, and whatever else you may have experienced throughout this past week. I do want to jump in and say hello to Sparta Rules 1993. That's Anthony. It's good to see you, Anthony. And TMZ, Mr. Zombified. Good to see you too, brother. It's good to see excuse me, it's good to see our returning viewers or some of our core community members coming back to the live show. It really supports the show, supports the channel. It helps get the message out to more and more people. Even after the live show is done and we're all, finished hanging out here, right? But again, shout out to you gentlemen and ladies for coming out. Shout out to our moderator, Mrs. Mod. My wife, who is keeping the conversation fluent in the chat. So shout out to her. She's awesome. But now with that out the way, I tell you what, let's jump right into a little bit of housekeeping as we have more friends and fam trickle on in. And again, I'm going to talk to essentially two audiences here, right? We have our current viewers that are present with us right now. I super appreciate you. And remember, I want to encourage you that if you are unable to stay throughout the duration of the live stream, I totally understand, but stick around for as long as you can because we have a lot of valuable information that's going to be shared in today's live stream. But first and foremost, on your way in or on your way out, do be sure to give this stream a like. And if you're a first time viewer and I haven't yet, earned your subscription, or you're a regular viewer and you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, hopefully it is this live stream where I am either entertaining or educational enough to have earned your subscription here on YouTube. We have a lot of fun and exciting content coming up here in 2021 as we continue to try to get through this drought that has, from what I've seen from other tech creators on the platform or here on YouTube, it has kind of down their content strategy or shifted the mindset within the content strategy in terms of what the community expects from, large influencers and even micro and mini influencers such as myself, right? Because there's always viewer expectation, so important. So, but we have a lot of fun and exciting new content coming up that's either going to be helpful and most importantly entertaining, because if you are no stranger to the content here, then you know that as much as I love to share valuable information and help you, with your journey on this platform and then continuously to thrive as a gamer on this platform, um, one of the missions here is to keep you entertained and both informed at the same time. I think there is value in entertainment though. So that's why in a lot of our videos and a lot of the content, you see a certain style to them that may not be seen in other videos. So that's just kind of like a director or producer's, tick, like a signature I'm leaving on there. But yeah. So, all right, so let's jump right into everybody's favorite segment here really fast. And again, if you're a replay viewer, I just want to inform you that we are referring to our housekeeping segment. And that's where we just go over a few ways you could help support the channel. So if you haven't yet and you want to sign up to our email list, you will be able to find this link and all the links that we will run through here really fast down in the basement, aka the description box. But if you haven't yet sign up for our email list, right? Unity starts with you. Community is a word, if you will. If you break it down into two parts, has two separate meanings, but put together, right, it forms this well-rounded marriage. So community, unity, and commune, the ability for us as like-minded individuals to get together and keep the conversation going off of this platform, should the channel and the brand be compromised here on this platform. With our email list, I will be able to maintain a direct line of communication with you as a member, as a core member of the audience, and you will also be able to remain updated on any new programming or new features that we will add to the channel and that will be coming here in the future. I also every once and again will send out live stream invitations if it's a significant live stream special or a conversation that I think is relevant to the core base of our community. Also, we've had community members mention that they don't receive all of the notifications for our live streams, which is interesting because YouTube typically favors live content, in my opinion, anyway. So, and they've also told me that they've gotten the notifications after the live stream has posted. So that's a little frustrating to deal with, but it's one of the reasons why I leave the live stream up as it is in the event that you are unable to make it and you are still very much well versed with the format of the show and how it's presented. The idea is to have it be as close to the experience as if you were here while we were live. So with that aside, sign up for our email list, TLDR version, get invites to our Discord community, updates on any new content changes or programming added to the content, and just in case if the channel is compromised and we need to reboot and start over, I am able to, communicate directly with you. Also, when we launch companion channels, if you will, under the Lab Network, you will be the first to know and subscribe you know, should the should the sub channel be relevant to you as an enthusiast and as a gamer. Now, the second way you can support Inside the Lab is, of course, through merch, right? Every creator's favorite stream. But check out the merch. We have stickers as low as $4.99, right? Premium shirts as high as $22.99. Hoodies, long sleeves, tri blends, V-necks, all sorts of different swag you can check out over there. We have a few of our signature lines like No Player in the Wild, which, sorry about that, I have a this phone doesn't really ring all that much. Oh well, but we're gonna act like it's not there. But anyway, Murphy's Law, right? If things can go wrong, it will go wrong. I swear this phone never rings, and we really don't use it. But again, check out the merch. We have graphics like the plug here, one of my favorites with the USB on it, right? And the Alphabet Boy shirt, a popular amongst the community. I believe XLR Gaming, or Cliff. Some of you are familiar with him. He's also in our Discord. I believe that's the shirt he picked up, and my son liked this one here, the I test. So, and again, this is a limited edition, right? As it is the only white white version of this hoodie, and it won't be up for long. So do check out the merch if you're interested in supporting the channel that way. And then last but not least, if you will, is our website, which again is comes at no cost to you, right? As a visitor, it's just the traffic and the activity on the website really helps again push the content and push the message further out into the far reaches of the internet. But a lot of helpful a lot of helpful content over here as well. Our community blog. You can learn more about me inside the lab, and of course, check out the whole entire videography. These links and more you can find in the description box below. And if you are a replay viewer, you most likely can jump down in the comment section and check out the pinned comment, which you will be able to find those links there as well. Ooh, all right. Housekeeping's out of the way, fam. Let me jump right here into the chat really fast. TMZ says, I'm picking out the motherboard and power supply is at the top of my list on every build. Yeah, man, that's a good approach, a good strategy to have, TMZ. And that's essentially a strategy that we will cover at one point of this live stream. I don't want to fast forward too far down the road, but yeah, I mean, picking out your motherboard and your power supply, it should be at the top of your list among other things. And depending on your motherboard type, that will also determine other components, right? So that's something that we're going to talk about a little bit further in this live stream as more and more folks trickle on in and join us. So we're going to jump right over into our warm up, and that's with starting with our title card, right? And that's understanding the foundation of your gaming PC or what's in a motherboard, and understanding what all goes into that buying decision, right? Because essentially there are three different types of PC gamers, right? One, those who look to push the limits of their hardware. Two, those who wish to do none of those things. And three, those who are eventually compelled to do both. So, regardless of regardless of the life path that you are planning on to undertake, understanding your motherboard is a crucial first step, right? As TMZ mentioned, it's one of the first steps that they take, picking out your motherboard and your power supply, but it's a crucial first step when parting out or upgrading your gaming PC. Both categories, whether you are again upgrading it or you're in the process of building a companion machine or a machine for a friend or a family member or a relative. But currently there are many different options available to the market or to you as a consumer. And even with the GPU market currently in shambles, we're not going to talk about it a lot here because at this point, we are all familiar with the situation. And if you haven't yet, and you're here watching on the replay or you're here now and you haven't checked out the Doomsday Clock video I published, I believe, last week, I highly recommend you check out that video. It's a great story and great content that kind of explains in greater detail of what's going on and essentially the future or the fate of PC gaming as a platform. But with the GPU market currently, foobarred, regardless of your method to entry, we cannot and should not ignore, right, the significance in buying the right motherboard for your specific needs, right? And even for the well initiated, this process can be a confusing and daunting task. So, we are going to cover some of the most important features in the motherboard, what all should go into your buying decision, and how to identify what your specific needs are or will be as a PC gamer or enthusiast. That is what we are discussing in this live stream. And again, if this is your first time here, I couldn't drop it, fam. Again, if this is your first time here, or if this is your first time here and you're here on the replay or you're here live right now, I am Terrence, your host, your conductor, your operator of this here live machine that is our weekly live experience. If you have any questions throughout the duration of this live stream at any point, feel free to drop it into the live chat here, right? Again, this is an interactive experience. I will answer your questions or even just sharing your victories with the rest of the community. And if you're here on the replay, I highly recommend you stick out for the full duration of this live stream. I do know, excuse me, our live streams historically have gone over the hour mark, but don't worry, fam. A lot of things are going to change coming up here in the future for the good, but a lot of things are going to change coming up here in the future, given as well as how our live stream is structured or formatted. But for our replay viewers, I highly recommend you stick around. Quite possibly, there could be a question that's presented to myself from somebody in the community that may help you solve a pain point or help you solve a problem you may or may not have yet considered in your journey with ascending onto this platform that is the highest pinnacle or the best way to experience a video game. That's essentially how we break it down here in the community. But that's what we're discussing in this live stream. And again, feel free to jump down into the chat. I will answer any and all questions along the way. Our live streams essentially double as a ask me anything, a weekly ask me anything, because perhaps your questions could change throughout the week. Maybe a motherboard that you thought was available last week no longer is available, and you may need to shift your strategy now with your build. So you say, hey lab, I didn't have that question last week, or hey lab, I didn't even have this issue last week. Could you help me identify the right component or put me back along the path of building my PC or getting on this platform? Our overall mission, if you will, our overall mission here on this channel or here in this community is to convert as many gamers over to this platform as possible, making their journey, right? Making their journey or their transition as easy as possible for them to just sit back, relax, and enjoy some games. Or if you're a creator, maybe you want to create video content, create thumbnails, create graphic content. Maybe you're an aspiring game developer or your career path branches off either of those fields. Maybe you want to be a editor for a creator, or maybe you only want to create graphics and overlays for streamers, or maybe you want to only become a 3D animator and model 3D objects. Maybe that's your career path. You necessarily don't want to run, say, a channel or a game studio, which is very expensive. I did it for about 10 years. It's not cheap. It's costs a lot of money. So, but rather, or regardless of your life path or where you are going, our mission here in this community is to help you with that ascension, right? Is to not climb the mountain for you, but it's to help you or to help make that climb a bit easier for you to manage, because building a PC, there are so many questions that goes into what type of motherboard should I buy, what's the right size case, how much watts should my power supply have, what kind of storage should I use a water cooler or an air cooler, should I use a 6 core and 8 core CPU, do I even need a graphics card? Or there could be so many questions that goes along with the process, and if you're not familiar with that process, it could be an extreme turnoff that just pushes away that potential PC gamer away from this platform. So here in this community, we have a lot of knowledgeable and helpful individuals that if we're in a situation where I am unable to provide you a solution, chances are there are someone here in this community that can help you. And even then, if I'm unable to help you right here, right now in this live stream, because we do have to keep the show running and fluent, I welcome you to follow me over on Instagram and over on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT. And even if your question comes to you after the live stream or outside of our office hours, shoot me a DM over on those two platforms, fam. I will do my best to get to the DM. I don't always get to them as fast as I admittedly would like to, but I will respond to you and I will also follow you back. So follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at Inside the Lab YT. Shameless plug over. So let's jump right into the meat and bones here of the conversation. And that is, we're going to start with discussing the different motherboard types, right? So there's going to be essentially two core areas that we are going to discuss and overlook in this live stream. The first one being is the different motherboard types. So starting with AMD, because essentially we only have two manufacturers to choose from, AMD and Intel. But starting with AMD, and we're going to stick to current platforms. So that's very important. There's nothing wrong with the older, what we like to call legacy. We don't necessarily call it older here in this community, but what we more so refer to it as legacy components or legacy hardware. So we're going to stick to modern platforms and modern hardware for the sake of this discussion, and that's simply because a lot of these components are available at new price to performance, a new price to performance price points. So with legacy hardware and legacy components, the value can sometimes be muddled. So just keep in mind that a lot of the different areas that we cover is applicable to older platforms, right? So older motherboards. So just keep that in the back of your mind or back of your pocket, or I don't know, whatever you got behind you, put it back there. But the AM4 socket, right? So that's the Ryzen socket, has a total of 8 chipset models. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the word chipset, put that back there with the other thing I told you to put back there, because we're going to cover that more as well. But for starters, just know that AMD has essentially 4 chipset models on its current AM4 platform, right? That being the A320, B350, X370, B450, X470, and B550 and X570. No need to try to remember them all or familiarize yourself with them all or say, hey, should I be writing these down? No, but Professor Lab will be on deck tonight or here on this live stream. But we're going to stick to the 300 series chipset for the sakes of this particular segment. But do know that for the AM4 platform, there are 8 chipset models. So you have essentially 8 different models you can pick from in between the different chipset generations. So that's in between the Ryzen 1000 and all the way up to current Ryzen 5000. But the biggest difference between each of these boards, with a few features aside, will be PCIe 2.0 and 3.0, and most importantly, PCIe 4.0 compatibility with your with any storage drives or your graphics card, if your graphics card supports PCIe 4.0. But you can essentially overclock, because unlike Intel that you'll see that we will discuss, you can essentially overclock on all Ryzen motherboards, right? On essentially all B300 AM4 motherboards, because all of the Ryzen CPUs have unlocked multipliers. Not the case for Intel. So one would say, well, if I am not interested in overclocking, should I opt in for a motherboard that doesn't support overclocking? Well, we're going to discuss that often ignored phrase, or the phrase that mentions that one say, hey, you cannot future proof your system. I say contrary to the belief, you may not be able to future proof it because technology moves at such a fast pace, but you will be able to say keep up with the future. Very important. Could you future proof? Perhaps not, because there's always going to be something new, flashy, and fresh introduced to the marketplace. Excuse me. But maybe you can assemble a system that can at least keep up with that pace. So your current Ryzen CPU, maybe you don't want to overclock. Maybe your graphics card doesn't support PCIe 4.0. Does that mean you should opt in for a lower end board? Not necessarily. You can keep up with the pace by jumping in with, say, a B450 motherboard, or a board that's becoming more and more popular because it does support, say, up to Ryzen 2000 series CPUs, and that's, say, a B550 motherboard. But essentially, the biggest feature in between will be the set of features that comes on board that motherboard and that particular chipset. PCIe 2.0, 3.0 being one of them, and PCIe 4.0 being the most popular buzz phrase, right? Or I guess the marketing buzz phrase, if you will, that we're seeing on a lot of new hardware. And then for Intel side, now Intel can get a little tricky, so do be sure to stick around for this next part, because Intel really made things a little complicated, and you got to give AMD a little bit of credit here for what they did with the Zen microarchitecture by simplifying the chipset, along with how the overall in terms of the socket support for multiple generations. That's just not something we see with Intel, as you will see we cover here in our next segment. But with Intel, you have essentially two sockets. So just like we mentioned, you have AMD's AM4 socket with its Ryzen architecture. Intel has its LGA land grid array socket with its 1151 and 1200 socket. Now, essentially 1151 is version 1 and then you have 1151 version 2. But all of these different motherboards offer different features as well. The biggest difference between 1151 and 1151 V2 is essentially Intel needed to introduce a newer socket to be compatible with higher end or higher core count CPUs. I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. Historically, Intel always caught slack for requiring you to say buy a new motherboard every two CPU generations, and that became a costly endeavor for a lot of people. It's one of the reasons why when AMD came out of the gate swinging with its Zen architecture and its Ryzen CPUs, they made an emphasis that hey, we're going to support the AM4 socket all the way up into 2020 and beyond now, as we see that a select few of motherboard BIOS updates will enable you to run, say, a Ryzen 5000 series on a 300 or 400 series AMD motherboard. So that's astonishing compared to, say, Intel that essentially leaves two generations per CPU socket. Maybe that will change with LGA 1200, but we will see. So with 1151, which is compatible with 8th gen and 9th gen, or 1151 V2, 1151 was made for Skylake and Kaby Lake, which was 6th generation and 7th generation CPUs. But what you see here is a list of motherboard chipsets that is available on the socket. You have H310, B365, Z, and a few Z motherboards. We're not going to list them all because most of the lower end boards are used for mining or OEMs and data centers. But because we are talking about motherboards for gaming, or this is a gaming channel, we talk about gaming here, we're going to stick to the B, the H, and the Z models or chipsets. But again, more on that later. I wish I could do my like I do in the videos when I say more on that later, but we're going to stick to those three chipsets because those are essentially some of the most common motherboards offered to gamers and DIY builders who either A, don't want to overclock, or they are interested in some of the features that are offered on the more premium chipsets, say the Z400, 300, and even 9 or 500 series with 11th generation Intel CPUs. But it's important to know that Intel essentially changes sockets because of, or they make you change motherboards, essentially given how the dimensions change on the socket itself. It's you would say, well, Intel, you don't want to give Intel too much heat for it, right? Given how they change their socket dimensions, because with 1151 V2, the socket dimension remained the same as 1151, but the new socket reassigned pins that were normally just inactive. It reassigned those pins to add more power to supplement for 6 and 8 core CPUs. So that right there within itself made 6th and 7th generation obsolete after Z370 motherboards. Because if you wanted to use, say, an 8 core, a 9900K, you had to upgrade to a higher end motherboard, or you were only reserved on a Z370 and Z390 chipset. And then the same could be said for the 10900K, right? With the 10900K, you had to jump up to the Z400 series chipset or the 400 series chipset because that socket supported more than 8 cores. It supported 10. And then for Intel to once again in their infinite wisdom, they went ahead and gave us another architecture in the form of 11th generation, and for some reason left it at only 8 cores. So go figure. I think the 10900K has a lot of value if cores are what's needed for your particular workflow. But essentially, if you want to overclock and you want other technologies, and you have a K base or a KF CPU, then you want to go with a Z base motherboard. That's even if you say, at surface value, I don't necessarily want to jump in and overclock. I don't want to risk damaging my components, or I don't want to invest in a beefier CPU cooler because you also have to take into consideration that when you're overclocking, your TDP kind of goes out the window because you're introducing extra extra power, so that's generating more heat. So you're going to need a beefy cooler to help dissipate some of that heat and to sustain that overclock. Most importantly, to avoid thermal throttling, because if you overclock before, then dealing with that balance of heat, um, just heat and power can be really frustrating when it comes to trying to dial in a stable overclock, because you really have to make sure you have adequate cooling. But if you have absolutely positively no plans to do so in the future, then you can save hundreds of dollars by opting in for a B or H series motherboard, especially if you have a non-K based CPU, or some of the games you play are a little bit on the vanilla side and you say don't need a super fast CPU, right? Games like Fortnite and Minecraft can be played on as low as a i5 6500 or an i5 7400, 6th and 7th generation i5s. And of course, the higher you go, the slightly more performance you can expect. But you can also get those chips in non-K based variants, which would also save you some money. So this is from the perspective of a DIY enthusiast, or from the perspective of a system integrator, someone who offers their service to the community at large, that help them build their PCs or help them upgrade the core foundation of their PCs, say swap out the motherboard or exchange the cooler. Maybe your cooler failed, or man, Lord forbid your drive fails. That's one of the hardest things to troubleshoot. Um, in terms of, you just really need a separate drive on hand to see if that's really the core issue, and then reinstalling Windows and what have you. But anyway, this is from the perspective of a DIY enthusiast. So if you're buying a pre-built, chances are the motherboard, or say if you're buying a Dell or an Alienware PC, chances are those motherboards are OEM boards and are only available to that manufacturer. So you're kind of already out of the loop in that regard. So this is why we're more so speaking to the DIY enthusiasts. Let me switch back here, because this is actually more important, because this is why we're actually talking to the DIY enthusiasts. But even if you are interested in buying a pre-built, or you're having a custom pre-built made for you, that's where you are involved with the buying process, like you're using NZXT's BLD service, or having your system built from, I don't know, insert any system integrator that's here large here on the website. Like, man, none comes to mind. Cyber power, if you will. Maybe you're having someone, a system integrator like that, build it for you. Just keep in mind of your CPU type or your CPU architecture, because whatever motherboard you end up, it doesn't necessarily have to be the motherboard you use for the inevitable near future. You could always still upgrade your motherboard. This is why we are not only speaking to the DIY enthusiast, an individual, say, who's having their system built for them, but we're also talking to you, an individual who just say, I don't want to build, I just want my system, I don't want to pay, I just want to order from Amazon, have it shipped to my door. I'm okay with, some of the pre-builds and the extra cost. That's fine, fam. But should you say end up with a high core count CPU, or you're on an AM4 platform, say your pre-build only came with a 2600X or a 3600, or something along the lines of there, a less core count AM4 Ryzen CPU, and you want to upgrade to a faster CPU with higher IPC, you're only maybe a BIOS update away, and a new motherboard even, or maybe you don't even have to switch out your motherboard. Maybe you're just a BIOS update away. It's still important that you understand the process. So when you are ready to make that decision, you're well informed of where and how, or most importantly, how to spend your money in terms of that upgrade. TMZ says, just having an upgrade path for the future is a huge deal. Yeah, I totally agree, and it's something I look at with every system that I build, or if I am configuring the system for a client, right? I try to, even if it's them without asking, I try to leave some level an upgrade path that will offer an increase in performance, or an aesthetic overhaul, or a way to modify the way the system looks, rather that be with, say, custom cables, or the addition of an AIO, right, or some RGB fans, more case fans, or additional storage, or an M.2, more RAM slots, more PCIe slots. Just a wide upgrade path that allows you to add more to your experience, right? It allows you to invest in your overall experience, a bit more, even if it's in smaller chunks, right? Say you save up a few $100 every 3 or 4 months, and you say, hey, I have about $300 or $400, I can make a solid upgrade to my system. That could almost be a motherboard and newer CPU if you still have DDR4 memory, right, on on say an older platform. Maybe you're on, maybe you have a 6600K or a 6700K. Maybe you're only limited to four cores on your platform, and you want to upgrade to a faster CPU. You can take that upgrade or take that money and invest in that upgrade to enhance your experience. Something we also talked about on the channel is having that cost absorbed by selling your older components, and that way it makes the upgrade even less impactful in terms of your finances. So one thing I always recommend is take good care of your components. Take good care of them as if you would be interested in buying them in the future, right? How would you want that graphics card to look in terms of appearance at face value? How would you want that case to look, having all the hardwares, the original packaging? If these are things that you're interested in having with, you know, components that you would buy, then apply that same energy and maintain your hardware. That way it maintains its resale value and it makes your upgrades, less financially impactful. So let's jump back over, and we're actually going to jump into the second content block, and that is different socket type. It's different socket types. Man, I said I wasn't going to fumble the ball, but here we go. So first turnover, but I picked it back up and we're going to run with it. So we talked about different motherboard types, right? We talked about different motherboard types. We talked about how AM4 has 8 chipset models currently available to the marketplace, supporting a wide range of different CPUs. And then we talked about Intel's LGA 1151 V1 and V2 that supported 6th, 7th, and 8th, 9th generation CPUs, and its LGA 1200 that supports 10th and 11th generation CPUs. So we talked about the different motherboard types that's available between those two CPU and or those two CPU manufacturers. And we said that we're going to stick to some of the um, offerings that are available to DIY enthusiasts. On the AMD side, that motherboard type was, we're going to stick to the X chipset, the B chipset, and even the A chipset, because the A chipset, it doesn't support overclocking. So if you're like, I don't want to overclock at all, I just want an affordable motherboard. I have a 2200G, I have 8 GB of DDR4 memory, I got my core lab, I got my core. All I need now is, say, my case, my power supply unit, my storage, and I'm good. I'm good to go. I'm rocking with a PC. So on the A chipset, it's important to note that that does not support overclocking, but all you can overclock on all B300 series chipset motherboards. So that's why we're sticking with the A, the B, and the X. The X being the enthusiast chipset over on the Ryzen side, and then for Intel, again, we're sticking with the 1151 V1, or most importantly V2, again because it supported the latest offering, the 8th and 9th generation Intel CPUs, and the LGA 1200, which again is the newest chipset over on Intel, or the newest socket with its 10th and 11th generation CPUs that have incredible value, if you will, especially now given that they've aged a little bit on the market. For example, the i5 10600K was selling for just a hair over $200, and then the i5 11600K, which still sells for about, last time I saw it at Micro Center, it was at 249. So hey, if you don't need no more than 6 cores in your workflow and with your games, then that could be an incredible buy for you. That could, run you a little bit ways, and you still have upgrades you can make to your CPU. Say you can double back and or double up. Say if you go with a 10600K, you can upgrade to the 10900K, the 10 core 20 thread CPU with the boost clock or turbo up to 5.3 gigahertz, right? So this is why, and you will hear us repeat this throughout the duration of this live stream, it's good to leave yourself with some upgrade, with a little bit of upgrade overhead. But so we talked about the different motherboard types. So we're going to discuss the different socket types, right? Because you have the sockets which are exclusive to the CPU family or the CPU generation. I like to refer to them as a family because, well, that's what they are, a family. But essentially, your socket types are exclusive to, excuse me, the CPU family or generation. And we're going to start again with AMD because it's been they're the talk of the town now. But again, with AMD, we have their highly coveted AM4 socket, which is only compatible with Ryzen CPUs. AM3 and AM3 Plus for bulldozer was for bulldozer and pile driver, which they were okay for the times, but thank goodness Zen or Ryzen is much better. But hey, I'm not gonna crap all over the FX series. Again, they were necessary for the time, and the video we did on the 9590 was eye-opening even for myself. And if you haven't seen that video, it's aged still quite well in my opinion. Still a lot of value there you can see in that CPU and or that platform should you be able to find one on the marketplace at a decent price. I would say, FX 9590 and an AM3 Plus motherboard with DDR3 RAM, I would maybe say you could maybe pick up for between 120 to 119 bucks. That's not bad if you want to put more of your used budget into other areas like say your graphics card or faster storage. In that way, just like TMZ had mentioned, when you're ready to upgrade, you're only needed to upgrade say the core foundation of your system, that being the the compatibility or the DDR, DDR format, switching from 3 to DDR4, right? Say going with a Ryzen X570 motherboard and a 5800X or a 3600X or a 3800X, that would be a heck of an upgrade for you jumping from a 9590. But again, they were okay for the times, but as you can see, AMD supports a wide range of CPUs on their chipset. So you have the A320, the B350, and the X370, the B450, X470, X570, supporting of course the 300 series and the 400 series supported Ryzen 1000, and then right along down the road, as you can see, with X570 supporting Ryzen 2000 series CPUs all the way up to, of course, Ryzen 3000 and beyond with a BIOS update, which you will see we talk about in an upcoming video. That video is going to be, wow, just probably one of the um, longest videos produced that's not a live stream, and like that's pre-recorded footage, just like an overall cut video. It'll probably be one of the longest I've done, but also one of the deepest in terms of story and content and what's all that all involves in it. But we talk about that with updating your BIOS to make sure your CPU is compatible with your motherboard and the issues you may run into. But with Ryzen and their AM4 socket, their socket specifies, if you didn't know, that the let's jump over now that we let's jump over from here, because the biggest difference with the AM4 socket is that the 4 just implies that you need 4 holes to fasten your CPU cooler. Now, the biggest difference between AM3 and AM3 Plus socket was that the AM4 socket is slightly smaller. That the AM4 socket is 54 by 90 millimeters, or about 2 by 3.5 inches, and AM3 Plus was 48 by 96 millimeters, and the AM4 socket has 1,301 contact pins on the slots here, or on the socket. So if you didn't know, the pins on the back of the CPU, or the back of of Ryzen CPUs or AMD CPUs in general, they drop down into the socket. They are extremely delicate, and I haven't, I mean, I don't even want to jinx it, but I haven't had the issue of a bent pin, but it's not hard to do, right? Especially when you are taking your cooler off, say if you're servicing your CPU or replacing your thermal paste. These are all normal, normal maintenance operations you may have to undertake, and it's just one of the ways where you could end up with a bent CPU. If you bend your CPU, chances are you're out of luck. Getting it back in place is extremely difficult to achieve. I shared in a story let me switch back here. Let's get into a little story time with Lab here. A while back, I had shared in a story when we were talking about buying used parts on the market and what to look for. And I had talked about where I had encountered a seller who wanted to sell a Ryzen CPU. I can't remember what generation it was, but it was almost too good to be true. And so, hey, I kicked the tires a little bit, and I said, let me just see what, see if I can convince myself that there's a reason not to pull the trigger, as it was not going to be a local meet, it was going to be shipped to me. So the seller only had one picture, I believe it was two pictures. It was like a picture of the box and then a front, a front view of the CPU. So I had hit the seller up and I said, hey, can I see more pictures of the CPU, more specifically pictures of the pins on the back? And they said, oh yeah, sure, no problem. And they sent me the pictures, and sure enough, there was like three or four bent pins that were clearly visible. And I said, well, those have bent pins, and this system is for a client, and I don't want to take the risk of there being future system critical, system failures. So I'm going to have to respectively pass. And I also recommended and suggested to that seller that they put that into the description of the CPU that they're selling. Let the person know that there are bent CPUs and there's a chance that the CPU doesn't work. Of course, I didn't get a reply back, but I was just trying to look out for the next person who may come along and um, identify it the same way I did and say, hey, this could be a good deal. I better jump on this, right? I say act first, act fast. I didn't act first, I didn't act fast on that deal. I was a little skeptic because I'm like, hey, this is too good to be true. And if the seller didn't have anything to hide, then they would have uploaded as many pictures. At least four is what I would recommend for any component you're selling. You should have at least four different pictures covering any sensitive areas on that component. If it's the graphics card, take a picture of the input output shield, take a picture of the PCB, take a picture of the front cooler, take a picture of the hardware label, so the buyer, the potential buyer, can easily identify what the component is. If it's your motherboard, take a picture of the socket, right? So that to make sure that there's no bent pins if it's an Intel motherboard, or if there's no objects lodged into the socket if it's an AMD motherboard. Take a picture of the VRMs, take a picture of the PCIe lanes, take a whole picture of the front motherboard. So I mean, fam, the list goes on and on, but a good rule of thumb, what I would recommend, is at least four pictures, and that way it covers all of the most important areas of that component, right? So mini rant over, mini story time over. I'm not good at either one. But so that's AMD socket. Let's jump over to Intel, right? So Intel's LGA 1151, it's also known as socket H3 for 1151, socket H4 for 1151 V2. But 1151 V1 or H3 socket supports 6th and 7th generation CPUs. So that's Kaby Lake, Skylake again. That's 6700K and the i7 and 7700K. Oh man, remember how popular the 7700K was before Ryzen came along, and it just made six core CPUs so much more spicy, if you will. Which, speaking of 6 core CPUs, then Intel responded abruptly with their 1151 V2. So they had to come out with a new socket just to be able to compete with the allure of having affordable multi-core chips over on the Ryzen side. So they introduced the 1151 V2 socket, which was updated to support Coffee Lake and the Coffee Lake refresh, the ninth generation 9900K, which had 8 cores and 16 threads, and then the 8700K, which had 6 cores and 12 threads. The 8700K it was a favorite, was a CPU favorite of mine to this day. But I digress because I don't like to play fiddle to no specific manufacturer. But that's the core difference between the 1151 socket and the LGA 1200 socket. As you can see here in our illustration, is where the socket key in position is, or where the notches is. And this is why Intel had to introduce a entirely new motherboard series, if you will, switching from the 8-core 16-thread 9900K over to the 10-core 20-thread 10900K. It had to had to reassign the reserve pins to deliver more power for the higher core count CPUs. Most importantly, again, the 10900K. But and then the microarchitecture familiarizes the family of CPUs. Remember how I told you the CPU could be your CPU could be considered a generation or like a family, and that more so the microarchitecture identifies the silicon that they are fabricated on. So with AMD and Intel, you have AMD on one side and you have Intel on the other side. We're going to break down really fast here the different microarchitectures. I see Ron Richards just popped in. It's good to see you, Ronnie. What's happening, brother? It's good to see you. Welcome to the live. Welcome to the live. I do want to encourage anybody who just joined in. If you just joined in, welcome, welcome, welcome. I do invite you to hit that like button for me. It's like, it's like tapping the bell. Let me know if you just walked into the building and letting us know that you're checked in. Just do me a favor, hit the like for me on your way in or on your way out. It really helps get this live stream out to more viewers, even while we are currently live right now. And in this conversation, we are discussing, what's in a motherboard and understanding the core foundation of what goes into a motherboard and what you should consider regardless of where you are at in your process of getting your system built. We talked about the different motherboard types, right? So that's the different chips that you have available to each CPU. For AMD, that's the A320 all the way up to the X570. For Intel, the LGA 1151 and 51V2 and LGA 1200, and between the 6th and 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, 11th generation CPUs. And now we are discussing the different socket types, which covers the class or family generation CPUs that belongs to that socket type. So we are at AMD and Intel, and the different microarchitectures that identifies the family of CPUs and the silicon that they are actually made on. So with AMD, you have Zen, which is Ryzen 1000, Zen Plus, Ryzen 2000, Zen 2, Ryzen 3000, Zen 3, Ryzen 5000. I know it gets weird from 2 to 3, but that's because AMD introduced their mobile and desktop APUs and named those the 4000 series, so that's why they skipped from 3 to 5. And then with Intel, you have your 6th generation, which is Skylake, your 6700K and 6600K. 7th generation, which is your KB Lake 7700K and i5 7600K. 8th generation, which was Coffee Lake, which was 8700K. And again, there's an asterisk here because this is where Intel shifted to a newer socket, right? This is where they had to shift over to that 1151V2 socket to support more than 4 cores. The 6-core 12-thread CPU being the 8700K. And then the 9th generation, which was under the same socket, but still introduced a newer chipset with the Z390 chipset, required a more power to supplement the extra 2 cores and 4 threads. The 9900K, the 8-core 16-thread 9900K. Now, all of these CPUs, right, within their each an individual family. For example, Zen 3 being the fastest lineup of current AMD CPUs. Ninth generation not being, but for the sake of simplicity, I excluded 11th generation and 10th generation. Most importantly, because Alder Lake 12th generation, believe it or not, is right around the corner. Although it feels like we've been bombarded with newer Intel CPUs as of lately here, but each one of these CPUs or each one of these CPUs in these families have different architectures. They serve different needs, and they are supported on a wide range of different chipset. For example, we looked at our chart and we saw that the motherboard type, remember the first segment we covered, depending on your motherboard type will depend on your CPU type. So if you wanted to use a Ryzen 2600, you would need to double back and make sure your motherboard, your chipset, supports that CPU class or supports that family of CPUs that supports the Ryzen 2000 series CPUs, that being Zen Plus. Tools like PC Part Picker, right? And I'm going to bring it up here really fast because we talk about PC Part Picker so much. It is an extremely helpful tool. If you didn't know, PC Part Picker has, filters that will help you eliminate any mistakes. For example, if I wanted to drop in this 5600X, even though it filters motherboards that are only compatible with the CPU,
I'm willing to bet that it will still give me a warning telling me that this particular motherboard may need to have its BIO flash to support the Zen 3 architecture. And it's either going to tell, yeah, so because I believe the 5600X does come with a cooler. So as you can see here, some AMD X570 chipset motherboards may need a BIOS update prior to using Vermeer, which is the name of the 5000 series CPUs. So we have our chipset. This is our motherboard type, right? This is our motherboard type. This is the CPU architecture or the CPU socket. So they're saying yes, this CPU is compatible with this chipset, but you may need a BIOS update. So PC Part Picker is a helpful tool that you could, you know, deploy along your journey of buying, regardless if you hit a roadmap and you say, hey, I'm not sure if I need to buy a cooler, right? I'm not sure if I need to buy a cooler. Let's say you pick a CPU that doesn't come with a reference cooler or a stock cooler. PC Part Picker will still identify that for you and let you know and say, hey, warning, your CPU doesn't come with a reference cooler, so you need to add one. You'll need to buy one. That way, regardless of where you are, right? Like ignorance is bliss. It doesn't matter if you're a first time builder, regardless of your experience level. It's good to, have these issues flagged before you start the actual build process, right? So, and then of course, if we add a cooler, let's just add the Cooler Master Liquid, we're just left with the we may need to flash the BIOS update. Now, if you luck up and say, well, I don't want to have to worry about that because I can't flash the BIOS. I'm an inexperienced builder. I've never done it before. I don't want to brick my motherboard. You could still opt for a configuration that wouldn't require you to update the BIOS, like the 3600, which see now that warning is eliminated. Now it's gone away. It's gone bye bye. It's gone to November, right? And even then, if we drop the cooler off because the 3600 does come with a reference cooler, if you wanted to save some money there, right? The warning about not having a cooler has also been removed. So PC Part Picker can be a really helpful guide that you can employ along your journey, all the way down to having the right dimensions for a case. For example, if you choose a case that's too small for your GPU, it'll let you know that say, hey, you might have some overhead room, or a smaller case, it may let you know that there may not be enough clearance in between your RAM modules. Just certain little things you may want to take into consideration. And because I've already picked a motherboard, it's going to give me cases that are only compatible with the motherboard. So we may not see that issue pop up. But PC Part Picker, very helpful tool. Enable the mode to where it's compatibility mode, where it's only going to show you parts that are compatible with, say, your motherboard, your power supply, your GPU. Like if we add a power supply that doesn't support the graphics card, doesn't have the correct pins, or doesn't have the right power connector requirements, it should let us know. And I'm just going to drop in, say, the 3080, which, okay, it does. So bad example. Let's see if we can change our power supply unit. But it doesn't matter because PC Part Picker is only going to show me power supply units that does support that graphics card. As you can see, all the way down to even a 500 watt, which I would not recommend. But PC Part Picker is an extremely helpful tool. It can really help you with, help you along your buying journey. Let me jump right here into the chat really fast. Oh, Just Samson. I see Just Samson had checked in. It's good to see you, Just Samson. Man, it's been a while, brother. I believe I've seen you across some of our other joint circles. I believe over Rob's channel and things. But it's good to see Just Samson. Always good to see a familiar face. I want to say Happy Father's Day once again to all the daddies out there. And or if you're not a daddy and you have a daddy and you can, regardless of your relationship with them, Happy Father's Day to them and to all the individuals out there in that father role doing what they can for these children. Now, let's get back to the message that is here assembling or understanding your motherboard. We were discussing that PC Part Picker is a helpful tool that can help you identify any issues with your motherboard, say when you are pairing your CPU type with the chipset. And let me just drop this here because even if you go over to say a B450 motherboard, right? So you're going back a chipset, you're going back to the 400 series chipset, which was more so made for the 2000 series CPUs. We're going to get that warning once again that tells us, say, hey, you may need to update the BIOS prior to using a T CPUs, that being the Ryzen 3000 series CPUs. And here goes our note here that the 12-pin power connector adapter is being supplied by two 6+2 power pin connectors. Please ensure that the 6+2 power pin connectors are not daisy chained and do not share the same power cable. So, and then right down here as well with the clearance for your RAM modules and tall heat spreaders. So this is why, again, PC Part Picker can be an extremely helpful tool that could point out any areas of concern you may have with parts you may be considering. Let's say it's Prime Day and there could be deals galore, and you say, "Hey, I want to buy some of my core components now. I can't really find the GPU, or the GPU market is a little, it's weird, right? It's in a bad place, right? It's in a bad place. We had Zeisty. I had responded to a comment. Zeisty had asked, "Hey, how do I, what's a good graphics card for?" I believe it was 350, and I'm like, I'm not even going to just assume we're talking about the used market here. I'm going to presume we're talking about the used market here and tell you that you are likely in the range of, say, a 980 or a 980 Ti in a GTX 1060, either 3 or 6 gigabyte. But if you want to take advantage of that new used price of performance and say jump on a Prime deal, and you say, hey, I'm looking at this motherboard, jump over to PC Part Picker before you buy the motherboard. Look into what features it has if it's not listed on Amazon, and then make sure it's compatible with whatever the CPU you may be targeting, right? Maybe you want to pick up, say, an APU. You want to pick up an integrated a CPU that has integrated graphics. Well, you want to make sure, for starters, that your motherboard supports integrated graphics, right? That it has HDMI out. I like this Gigabyte Mini ITX motherboard. Sorry, I just the inner squirrel, inner raccoon kicked in on me. But let's say you're looking at this motherboard and you're like, oh man, I like this B450 motherboard. It's on sale. I can pick it up for, say, $50. That's dreaming. I can pick it up for $50, but I also want the Ryzen 5 3600 because it's a popular CPU. It was $169 at Micro Center. Might even be a little less during Amazon Prime Day deals. You want to pick up that CPU and this motherboard because it's a good price. Jump over to PC Part Picker and see if there's any issues prior to you buying it, right? You may need to update your BIOS, so you may need a motherboard that supports, um, flashing the motherboard without a CPU, which can get a little tricky. We're going to talk about that in an upcoming video. We're going to talk about that in an upcoming video. But again, address any areas of concern before you run into the issue. And Sparta Rules said the cringe of that power supply. I might have missed it, but I'll take your word for it. Um, but yeah, PC Part Picker, PCPartPicker.com. Um, helpful tools. Of course, it's free to use. Free is my favorite price. You can save your list, and if it's a system that you are considering building yourself, you could shoot the link over to me. I can make changes for you, or I could say, hey, you have an M.2 slot available. You can say upgrade to an NVMe M.2 SSD for about $10 more. It's also a PCIe 4.0 compatible motherboard, so you want to take advantage of that. Say, hey, upgrade to a faster NVMe M.2. It's going to improve your system performance. It's going to improve system response time, load your games faster, all of those good things. So check out PCPartPicker.com. And I see we had a few more people that just joined in to us, and I just want to welcome you into the live show. Do tell me where you're watching at, what's going on in your neck of the woods. We are over here in the East Coast of the United States, over in the good old state of Maryland. And there's a lot of overcast here. We have overcast. It was supposed to rain, or we were on a severe thunderstorm. But I love the rain. It's one of my favorite weather events, if you will, storms and things like that. Like, I love just jumping in, getting some writing done, working on some thumbnails, editing a video, whatever the workflow may entail. But I digress. Welcome to the live show. We are discussing what's in the motherboard, or some of the core areas you should take into consideration when shopping for your motherboard, or even upgrading your motherboard if you are wanting to come from um, an older platform, say you're on the 1150 socket, which was for the Haswell lineup of processors or CPUs. So let's say you want to come up from the third and fourth generation CPUs, and you're ready to jump over to a DDR4 platform, and you're saying, "Hey, lab, what are some areas that I should look at when I'm buying my motherboard? What's a good amount to spend? Do I need PCIe 4.0? What are the benefits of PCIe 4.0? How many DIMM slots am I going to need? What's BIOS flashback and will I need it? How can I tell if my CPU supports my motherboard?" All of these different things. I'm not going to recommend a specific brand or manufacturer, as in my opinion, that could be very subjective, and I'm going to keep it 100 with you all here right now. None of them pay me to endorse them yet. So until then, I'm going to tell you that as a consumer, excuse me, look at these areas, or these are areas that you should take into great scrutiny when configuring your system. When it comes down to the manufacturer, look at brand reputation, right? ASRock, MSI, EVGA, um, just to name a few, Asus, which has a wide range of different class of motherboards. So I'm not going to necessarily recommend a specific manufacturer to you. Just what to look for in your motherboard when you are shopping, or say, hey, maybe you say, well, I like how ASRock has their boards, or how it's designed. Like I like the aesthetic on this ASRock board, or I like the price of, and that's okay too, fam. Like, please don't feel guilty for wanting to save a little bit of money. That's a fool's thought there, in my opinion. Don't judge somebody just because they want to save a little bit of money in an expensive hobby that's like PC gaming. Now, I'm also here to tell you, I'm not going to judge you if you want to spend a lot of money on your system. I think it's one of the great things about PC gaming is that you can spend a little bit and have a lot, or you can spend a lot more and have even more, right? It just depends on what direction you want to go with your journey once you reach the top of the mountain. See, once we all reach the top of the mountain, what we want at that point very much varies between what we want to achieve and what we want to do on our systems. If I just want to play some Warzone, or if I just want to play some Fort or Minecraft, then that's just what I want to do. But if I want to create content and I want to be a streamer here on the platform, I want to be a YouTube streamer or a Twitch streamer, right? What we want to do once we get up there on the top of the mountain is going to very much split, and it's going to very much vary in between each and every one of us. So that's what we're discussing in this live stream. Sorry, mini rant over. I was welcoming in our viewers that just joined us, but we're discussing your motherboard and a few important areas to take into consideration and look at. We just was on our segment discussing how PC Part Picker can be a helpful tool. Um, with that process. And if you are regular here on the show, you've seen us use PC Part Picker for a wide range of topics. I use it when I'm consulting clients. Usually they will send me their PC Part Picker list, and it will ask me, they say, hey, can you overlook here, or check out this build? Tell me if I'm missing anything, or is this a good combination? What kind of performance should I expect, or what type of resolution could I game at? And what's the FPS? What's the expected FPS output? Or maybe they're unsure on how to complete the next step of their journey. Maybe they're stuck on a mountain with their rope, right? You have your motherboard, your CPU, your RAM, you have everything but say your power supply. And you're like, but I don't know how much, what size power supply I should get. Should I modular, semi-modular, 80 plus gold, 80 plus bronze, 80 plus silver, titanium? Does it even matter? What does it even mean? I'm here to help. I'm here to help any and all as much as I can. I don't have all the answers, but I will do my damnest to make sure I help you achieve your obstacle, help you get over the hurdle, whatever roadblock you're hitting at the moment with your system. Here as of recently, a lot of the time it's been I can't get a graphics card. And I know at the beginning of this live stream, fam, for those of you who weren't present for it, at the beginning of the live stream, I said we're not going to discuss graphics cards a great deal. A great deal. The situation is sad and depressing as it is, especially if that is your obstacle. That is the roadblock you have encountered, and you're unable to complete your build. In the video Doomsday Clock, the future or fate of PC gaming, I mentioned that. We talked about that, right? We talked about ways you can overcome that obstacle, but most importantly, how a lot of unfinished builds have now sat on the tables of workstations and work tables. There are a lot of unfinished builds to where the client, consumer, customer had might have earmarked a certain amount at a time where GPUs were projected to sell at, I don't even know what normal is anymore, but I don't even know what close to, phrases like close to MSRP. But when GPUs were available and not, say, suffering from inflation. And so now that they are not available and are suffering from inflation, users are unable to complete their builds. So there are a lot of unfinished builds that say you can't shift the core because you might have strategized around a certain CPU and GPU combination, or a certain CPU and motherboard combination, right? Let's say if you're on Ryzen, which none of their non, say, U CPUs, the 20 like the or G CPUs like the 2200G and the 3400G, and he just announced 5700G, which I'm not cool enough. AMD didn't send your boy Lab one, so I guess I'm gonna have to buy one like all of the other parts I review around here. Um, but unless you had already planned and used a CPU that has dedicated graphics, if you bought, say, a 3700X or even a 3600X, and you don't have a graphics card, the only way around that is to get a graphics card, and it will more than likely be the graphics card that wasn't your first choice. In that video, we also talked about the significance right now, going through the tech demic, of compromising, right? And it still very much goes hand in hand. One thing I preach to new builders: build around your monitor. If your monitor is only 1080p 60 hertz, build around that, because really, fam, your next upgrade shouldn't be GPU centric as much as it should be monitor centric. Say, upgrading to either a higher resolution, right? Wouldn't necessarily recommend a higher refresh rate monitor unless you have a newer graphics card. You got lucky enough and you were able to pick up a 30 series or a 6000 series AMD graphics card. I'm sorry, RTX 2000 series graphics cards. They stopped being manufactured, but at one point they were still on the market, even new. But those they too have been greatly impacted by the techdemic, the 2021 techdemic. So you won't find those either at affordable prices, even on a used market. Right before the bubble exploded, I had my hands on the trigger ready to pull it for an RTX 2060 because I wanted to, review the performance of that graphics card in 2021. And it was right at the end where the RTX 2060 started to sell for over $400. I'm like, wait a minute, something's not right here at this price point for this graphics card. So I never pulled the trigger. And here we are in 2021. That graphics card is now selling for over $400, making it or significantly destroying its value. So if that is you, if you have an unfinished build sitting somewhere on a workstation or table, and you're like, Lab, I just can't do it. I wanted an RTX 3060, or I have an older graphics card, say like a 770 or a 780 Ti, and you are ready to upgrade to something with a little bit of higher VRAM, so you can, run your games in higher graphic fidelity, or say finally upgrade to a 1440p monitor. You may have to compromise now. You may have to shift your mindset and go with an alternative GPU to supplement your system, or even to upgrade to get that performance metric you're targeting, or to complete your system. Don't leave it sitting on a workstation table somewhere unfinished. Jump over into the used market where you can. There are still gems to be found here or there, and that's not the subject of this live stream, so we're not going to hang around onto it too much longer. A lot of you friends and fam are here so we can discuss motherboards. But again, like I mentioned earlier in the live stream, although the GPU market is in shambles, we can't ignore the significance of your motherboard. But if you are in a situation where your GPU is the one component that has left you with an unfinished build, consider compromising. I say consider compromising because if you had $600, let's keep it 100. If you had $600 for that 3070 or 3070 Ti, if you had $600, you still got that $600, fam. You could still very much buy a graphics card, but the key here is compromising, because it's not the graphics card you wanted. It's not the performance metric that you say, it's not the performance output that's important to you. but you may still have to compromise a little bit. You could take that whatever money you had earmarked for that, 2080 Ti or that RTX 3070 or 3080, right? That graphics card be at $849. So if you had that $849, you could actually save money by compromising, by coming down a few generations, say going with a 1660 Super or a 1660 Ti, somewhere in the $400 to $500 price range. Again, is it faster than an RTX 3070 or a 3080? Does it have as much VRAM? Absolutely, positively not. But will you be able to fulfill your build or make that upgrade, especially if it's on a previous generation GPU class? Absolutely. And in my honest opinion, that is what matters the most, right? Not about what you don't have in terms of graphics card, but what is available to you as a consumer. Which, speaking of consumers, let's jump right back to the discussion of motherboards because, again, we are discussing it or looking at it from the perspective of a DIY enthusiast, someone who is either looking to have someone complete their build for them or they are looking to do it themselves. So we were talking about the different socket types, which that familiar that classifies the CPU class or generation. In this example, we have the AMD Zen family of CPUs, the Zen 1, which was Ryzen 1000, Zen Plus, 2000, Zen 2, 3000, Zen 3, 5000, Intel 6th and 7th generation on the 1151 socket, and 8th and ninth generation over on the KV Lake. KV, KV Lake. Can you imagine? Dear Intel, next CPU architecture name, KV Lake. You're welcome, lab. But no, Coffee Lake. I'm sorry, Coffee Lake and Coffee Lake Refresh with the 8th generation and ninth generation lineup of CPUs. All of these CPUs, again, we were mentioning, have different features. They have different architectural makeups. They all serve different needs and they are all supported on a wide range of chipsets. TMZ says all of this GPU chaos pushed back my upgrade cycle. Yeah, and I wanted to identify once again that that little mini spiel was not just for those who were looking to say complete their build, but for even those who were looking to make a modest upgrade for their system. I was ready to upgrade with my editing rig, say to a Ryzen to a RTX 30 series graphics card. But between the ones I have now and even 20 series cards I have now, I just didn't necessarily need to. So it put mine on hold too, because again, your boy Lab, I'm not one of the cool kids on the playground yet. So Nvidia and AMD, they're not quite ready to send me samples, but that's all good. I will continue to cover the conversations that are relevant to this community and to the community at large and abroad. But you're right, TMZ, it has pushed back, say, the upgrade path for a lot of individuals, for a lot of people, especially now that there are newer games coming out. Those games are becoming more and more difficult to run. There are new features that are being supported in those games, things like DLSS and ray tracing, which I understand they're not popular features among the community at glance, but if you haven't seen the RTX 3090 series that we've launched, or we concluded the four-part tetralogy series, I highly recommend you watch that, as the last two entries in that series covered ray tracing and DLSS and the benefits, the pros and the cons to those features. Now, it did hurt a little bit to make that video simply because this graphics card, the RTX 3090, isn't available for anywhere near close to anything at MSRP. I had got mine at MSRP through a retailer connect, so I paid MSRP for it. But a lot of you don't have that luxury. But if you want, say newer features, if you had, say, a 10th generation GPU and you've had it this while, there's still a lot of value in the 10th generation, right? To someone that, say, maybe is on a ninth or seventh, fifth or sixth generation NVIDIA's GPU, or maybe they've been using integrated graphics this whole entire time and they've never had the luxury of gaming on a dedicated graphics card, which, man, is an experience that ultimately I hope many of PC enthusiasts, right? Whether you are an aspiring one or an established one, it's something that I highly a hope, poor choice of words there, but one that I really hope more and more people are able to experience, because gaming on a PC is the best way to experience a video game. Native resolution, high frame rates, right? Features like ray tracing, DLSS, and visual FSR, right? Which is supported on uh, 500 RX 500 series and NVIDIA's 10 series GPUs. So it's like really accessible at that point. But what's not accessible are the graphics cards that empowers these features. Rather that be RX 600, 6700T and a 6800T and a 6900 XT, or the RTX 30 series, which Nvidia, you know, they discontinued production of the RTX 20 series, forcing us with the unavailable RTX 30 series. So the used market again is your only path to trying to carve out your entry onto this platform with a dedicated video card. Binks, oh, I believe that said Binks. Binks, yes, it does say Binks. Binks says, I like your setup, Binks. I appreciate you being here, Binks. I think this is the first time we had the opportunity of interacting with one another. If this is your first time, Binks, welcome to our weekly live show. We do go live once a week, every Saturday, fam. Don't scrutinize your boy Lab too much, but I'm working on our time. I normally experience unexpected technical difficulties prior to going live, and that's just because I like to make sure things like the internet connection stable, audio is, microphones working, camera, lighting, and all things in terms of the back end and just how the show is produced. I like to make sure all of those things are worked out before going live. But Binks, welcome to our show. If this is your first time, I do hope that if you're not subscribed yet, I am either entertaining and educational enough to have earned your subscription. I do want to welcome you and others who have just joined in as well to hit that like button for me. It's going to help us get this video out in front of more people. And again, if you haven't just subscribed, hit that subscribe button down there for me. Invite more friends. Um, Subscribers aren't important to me as watch time, although subscribers help me identify how I'm performing in terms of watch time. So I know that can seem a little like janky, but trust me when I tell you, I appreciate all 2,000 plus subscribers we have here in this community. It really shows me that the content strategy is working for a lot of close-minded, like-minded individuals. So Binks, I hope that's you, fam. And I hope you join our community. Also, there's a lot of helpful information down in the description box that you can find at the conclusion of this live show. That's going to help you. That's going to help point you in the direction of more lab, of more content that could help you along your journey. Banks, if you already have a PC, do tell us what your specs are. And anybody else who just joined us, tell us what your specs are too. Some of you I know your specs, or I know what's in your system, and then some of you I don't. And I would love to know what you're rocking with. Builds of all backgrounds and budgets are welcome here. We don't scrutinize and we don't judge, fam. And if that's something you're into, you're in the wrong community. We just don't do that here. But we're going to bounce right on along with the conversation as we talked about the different socket types. We talked about the different socket types between AMD and Intel, which essentially are the different architectures or the different classes of CPUs. Now, at the center of your motherboard, you have the socket, right? As you can see here in our illustration. Swarmy says my PC, Swarmc, I'm sorry, Swarmc says my PC is boot looping. I took the GPU out, moved RAM, still looping. Any solutions? Swarmzy, yeah, I have a few solutions for you that you can possibly take. First and foremost, welcome Swarmzy to the channel. I don't believe we had the opportunity of engaging, so I just want to say welcome to the live show, first and foremost. Second, could you tell me what type what motherboards you have, what chipset that you have? If you're able to, either take out, unplug your power supply unit, power it off, unplug the 24 pin cable, the CPU EPS cable, it's either 8 or 4 pin cable. Unplug those two cables. Remove your CMOS battery if you can, and if you're also able to, you can find the jumpers on your motherboard. And if it's not a cap over it, you can jump it using a screwdriver. I don't want to confuse you or send the steps out too much, but you can start there. The problem that you're likely experiencing is your BIOS seems to be unable to post right with the BIOS code. So removing a CMOS battery will drain the battery and it will revert your BIOS. Let me switch back here. It will revert your BIOS to its factory settings or to its factory state. So remove your CMOS battery. I would say essentially the longer the better. But if you have the time, shoot for anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes. Really let the battery drain before you put it back into the motherboard. If it still doesn't work, also try using the jumper cables on the motherboard. That you may need to look at the manufacturer's website to see where those are located. Stormzy says the H370 Aorus Wi-Fi motherboard. So yeah, I'm not completely familiar with that motherboard. In fact, we can maybe try to bring it up here. Try to bring it up here. We'd have to let's drop these two. Jump over to the motherboard. It says the H370 Aorus gaming Wi-Fi. So this right here is what you would want to remove. Okay, you could correct me if you say no, lab, you're wrong. That's not my motherboard. But if this is the exact model, you're going to want to remove the CMOS battery here. Remove the battery. Again, unplug the 24 pin cable, 8-pin cable. Um, Completely turn off the power supply unit. Let the system completely drain its power. Then remove the CMOS battery. Pop that out. Leave it out for about 5-10 minutes. Let it drain completely. Pop it back in. See if you can post into the BIOS. And still, if not, you may need to check out the manufacturer's product page for this motherboard. Look to see where the jumpers is. I would try to. It sucks that there's only one. There's only one picture here, and I can't really bring it up too big. All right. Well, I was going to try to see if I can see the jumper pins, but it's essentially two pins on the motherboard. And if there's a cap, you're going to want to take that cap off, put it to the other side. But there could be specific set of instructions with doing that. So look at the product page for this motherboard. But your CMOS battery is right here, Swarms. Remove the CMOS battery, let the system drain, then pop it back in. Okay, and if not, try that step. And if not, your second option is to find the jumper cables on the motherboard and see if you can, reset it that way as well. As I see, you said, "Yep, that is correct. That's mine." So yeah, check out that's your CMOS battery, and that's what I'd recommend. Those two solutions, those two steps. That's the first. That's the first path. That's the path I would start you on. So keep me posted, and if you're not following me, Swarms, follow me over on Twitter or Instagram at Inside the Lab YT. Keep me posted. Let me know if you're running into any issues. I will continue to try to help you solve that issue as much as possible. I know it seems frustrated. Cell phones boot loop as well. Um, So just something to take into consideration. As I see you said, all right, I'll be right back. I subscribe. Cool. So yeah, if we're still here and we're rocking and rolling, let us know how that worked out for you. Do keep in mind again to check for the. Let me switch back here really fast because I think this looks like the no, that's a fan. I can see now it says system fan 2 right there. Okay, never mind. But your 2-pin jumpers are somewhere usually along the lines down here. This actually isn't a bad motherboard. The H chipset, so quite actually a little bit more affordable. But let's jump back here because we were discussing after we hopefully helped Swarmzy solve their issue with their motherboard. But we were discussing your motherboard and at a glance really fast here and the different what's on the motherboard. So at the center of your motherboard, you have the socket, which will determine, again, your socket will determine the CPU generation family that you can use in a technology that they will be able to support. Say, for example, PCIe 4.0 or USB 3.0 and what have you. And then the chipset, which you can see right there, says AMD X570. So that's our chipset. So your chipset, the motherboard series, will determine the CPU architecture that it is compatible with. That could be a board that supports a certain amount of cores or a CPU that has a locked or unlocked multiplier, or features which allows you to overclock. Essentially, when we say an unlock multiplier, let's keep it a stack. It's just your ability to overclock, which you would be able to do on this 500 series chipset. And I wanted to use this as an example because it doubles back to our PC part picker example we were using, where I pointed out that, say, hey, if you wanted a newer chipset, like the 500 series chipset, right, like the X570 motherboard, say you want PCIe 4.0, and you know, you just want to be on a newer modern platform, then you want to make sure that the CPU or that motherboard that you are considering, one, supports the CPU, and two, see if you need a BIOS update to use that CPU. Okay, but if you're unsure, just like I had recommended to Swarmzy, check your motherboard's product page, right? Make sure it's the correct model. Make sure it's the correct model, and then see if there is a BIOS update for the CPU that you're interested in. Is it future proofing? Well, remember where I talked about in the beginning of the live stream where future proofing, it's a tongue twister, maybe not, but future proofing is a challenging endeavor, right? Because technology moves at an extremely fast pace. Semiconductor shortage aside, um, you more so want to try to keep up with the future, right? Like keep up with the technology advancements. So that's if you want to save a little bit of money, you say, well, I can get a 3600, a Ryzen 5 3600, and a X570 motherboard combo. Say not this X570 motherboard. Say like the Asus Tough, which I believe clocks in at just under 130 bucks, 120 bucks. You can get your motherboard and your CPU for under 300 bucks to be on a newer platform. All you need is your RAM sticks, and you're in a good place. Now, I use AMD as an example here because AMD has excelled with this, with select motherboards. Matter of fact, we'll bring it up here with the select few motherboards supporting a wide range of CPU architectures. Right? Especially thanks to vendors being supplied with the necessary BIOS code, which made some X470 motherboards, as you can see here, and B3 450 and 450 motherboards compatible with newer line of Ryzen CPUs. For example, um, being able to use Ryzen 3000 series on an X470 motherboard, or Ryzen 2000 series on a select motherboard all the way up to X570. So even if you come across a used CPU on the used market, everything looks snazzy. You say, "Hey, lab, I don't mind taking a risk on a used market. I will do it. I saved like almost up to 400 bucks on my build by heading to the used market. That's more money you can put in a digital escrow that would allow you to say upgrade your graphics card in the near future to a graphics card you may want. If the 30 series graphics cards aren't discontinued, which they won't be anytime soon, even when we do get the 40 series. Although I digress, because one thing I mentioned, I believe it was Sparta Rules last week, who mentioned that they don't expect, or they don't forecast GPUs to get back to normal to like the next 5 years. And a few members in the community resonated with that, and I totally respect that. But I believe that if we're going to get newer silicone or newer generation of GPUs, that silicone will either free up the production of graphics cards that say couldn't pass validation as a 4060 or a 4070, and it couldn't pass validation as a 4060, then they will be turned into 3080s and 3080 Ti's. Now, I would more so expect to see faster memory in the next lineup of next series of Ryzen Intel. What am I talking about? Of NVIDIA graphics cards. I couldn't say it because again, the graphics card situation is such a fragile, delicate conversation, but I really do expect the next generation, the 40 series graphics cards, to more so be marketed as upgrades to, like, say, more RT cores, more Tensor cores. So the marketing terms would be like faster ray tracing performance, more DLSS performance, or better visual quality, or less loss of visual quality and more FPS in terms of using DLSS. It'll be things like that. Like, how much faster will they be at rasterization? Most likely not that faster than the RTX 30 series, but in terms of, say, ray tracing and DLSS, they will likely excel in those categories, and that's where Nvidia is going to put all of their eggs in a basket, in my honest opinion. But AMD has really excelled here with supporting a wide range of CPUs on their motherboards. Now, higher end motherboards like the X570 and even B550 typically supports NVMe M.2s. You have more memory or DIMMs, PCIe lanes, supports overclocking, which in some capacity equates to more performance, even if that's not solely measured in FPS. You also get better memory support, better XMP support the higher up the end in terms of chipset that you go. Now, super important that before buying the motherboard, you research the CPU socket, right? So that's AM4, LGA 1151 or 1152, and the generation. That's Ryzen, say 3600, 5600X, 9900K versus a 10900K. It's important you research the compatibility with the motherboard chipset, in this case, say an X570 or B550, at the same time, right? At the same time you are researching your CPU socket. Research the generation's compatibility with that motherboard. Just like this card here. As you can see, if you say, well, I have an X470 motherboard, it's a 1800X, or maybe an awkward combination to that extent. Maybe it's an X470 motherboard and a 2600, and you say, you know what, I want to upgrade to a little bit more performance. What can I expect? Well, you won't be able to jump to a Ryzen 5000 series CPU, but you will leave the door open for, say, a Ryzen 3000 series CPU. So just something to take into consideration. Research your motherboard's CPU socket the same time you research your CPU generation, and then make sure it's compatible with your motherboard's chipset. X570, B450, Z370 versus Z490. Between those two chipsets, especially Z370, Z390, and Z490, there's a huge architectural difference between those two CPUs. So if you're on a 9900K and you're saying, you know what, I'm ready to, say, edit some video, or I want to, work on pictures. Maybe I need more cores. Maybe you want to stream at a higher resolution. Maybe you stream with a lot of different tasks going on in the background. And so you say 8 cores aren't enough. 6 cores aren't enough. I need more, right? Perfectly fine. So you're ready to upgrade from an 8-core CPU. Maybe you want to upgrade to a 10-core CPU. Research your motherboard's compatibility with your chipset at the same time you're researching your CPU. In our PC part picker example, I started with a Ryzen 5 3600. Why? Because I said, let me use myself as a hypothetical example where I know I want to play some Fortnite. I want to stream Fortnite, or I want to stream Minecraft. Between those two, I want to make Minecraft like content, and I want to ensure that the experience, the quality is premium and as best as is presented as best that I can. So you want to make sure you start off with a CPU that could handle those tasks. And I have decided that 6 cores is enough. Minecraft isn't a demanding game. I checked the CPU requirements. I'm well above the minimum requirement in terms of a CPU. The game's not graphically demanding, so I know my graphics card. I know I want a Ryzen 5 3600, but I'm not sure on the motherboard. What kind of motherboard should I look at? So if you're going to look at a newer board, say like a 500 series chipset, you won't have certain features. But what that will enable you to do is upgrade to a faster 5000 series Ryzen CPU, say like the 5800X or the 5600X, when you are ready, or when you feel like you're able and ready to, say, level up your experience or enhance the visual experience for your audience. You can make that upgrade, you can make that buy, and all you would have to do is upgrade your BIOS, more than likely, right? As in our PC part picker example, we saw that to use a 500 series chipset with a Ryzen 5000 series CPU, you more than likely will need to flash the microcode on that motherboard. So highly recommend you research both at the same time. Now, we're rocking and rolling. We are rocking and rolling. Let's jump into the third segment, and that is the different motherboard form factors, right? Because, well, in case you didn't know, there are multiple form factors you can choose from, right? So we're going to piggyback off of the example I was just using. So, we decided on the 3600, right? The Ryzen 5 3600. So you yourself, you may know what generation or type of CPU you need. That's our Ryzen 5 3600. You've made sure it's compatible with your motherboard's chipset, right? With or without a BIOS update code. Let's just say for the sakes of simplicity, you've already established the fact that your motherboard won't need a BIOS update. So you know that your CPU and your motherboard, say, hey, I need a X500, I need an X570 chipset. I have a brand new Ryzen 5 3600. I'm good to go day one. All I have to do is either provide that to, to the system integrator, or if you are building it yourself or you're having somebody stand present right there and they are helping you, you know that you do not have that compatibility issue between the socket type and the chipset you want to go with. The socket type being the Zen Plus, or I'm sorry, Zen 2 Ryzen 3000 series CPU, and the chipset being the X570 motherboard, right? Insert any brand. Let's use the Gigabyte Aorus, for example. Bad Habit, it's good to see you, Bad Habit. Bad Habit says, Happy Saturday. Yeah, Bad Habit. And if you're a daddy, if you're a daddy, happy Father's Day to you. And if you're not, happy Father's Day to your daddy and all the daddies in the world. Here in the States, obviously, I'm sorry, I don't want to come off as rude. It's not like a global holiday, right? But here in the States, it is Father's Day, and I just want to share in sharing that, because it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you're a father. So here in the States, we identify the dads and even the guardians who are being fulfilling that role for these children. Our children are the future. They are future gamers, y'all. There are future, they're going to join the community, right? They may be playing on the vanilla consoles, but eventually they're going to want to, ascend over here to the platform. And regardless of if we're old farts or not, we're going to be right here to help them make that, ascension, right? So it's good to see you, Bad Habit. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Love seeing new and familiar faces coming into the live show, right? Like we had Swarmzy and Blink that had came in, some new cats. So it's always good to see new and old returning. Happy Saturday to you, Bad Habit. TMZ says that's what I did. I had a 2600X, flashed my motherboard, and it allowed me to put in a 5600X. It's good enough for me. Man, that is what I am talking about. I I got to get our soundboard. Sorry, Mrs. Ma was occupied, but I wanted a round. I'm gonna get a round of applause for TMZ, man. That's a heck of a flex right there, and that's how you do it. I mean, that's how you do it, TMZ. What'd you do with your 2600X? Did you repurpose it, or did you flip it over on the used market? But that's how you do it. And I'm pretty sure, regardless of that outcome, the 5600X that's a huge, performance upgrade from what Ryzen 2000 to Ryzen 5000. What are we looking at? Almost a 20+% IPC uplift going from. I mean, it's a 19% IPC uplift just going from Ryzen 3000 to Ryzen 5000. So you might as well factor in maybe another 9%, about 5 to 9% IPC improvement over 2000 to 3000, and say you're looking at almost a 30%, very close to 30% IPC uplift, which would equate to a much faster, significant chip. But that's how you do it, ladies and gentlemen. Just like TMZ said, I flashed my I flashed my motherboard and allowed me to put in a 5600X. It's good enough for me. Heck of a chip. The 2600X and the 5600X, still two very much two solid chips. But that's a solid move, and that's how you do it right there, ladies and gentlemen. That right there. And again, regardless of what TMZ decided to do with their CPU, as I see, they said they repurposed it for the wife. Still, very much you're passing that value down. So if you're building it for a family member or a close one, or in this case TMZ's spouse, you are passing that value down on to somebody else, right? Like TMZ said, it's good enough for me. The 5600 is good enough to me. I'm willing to bet the 2600X is going to be perfect for his spouse, right? It's going to be a perfect chip for them to really tackle any workloads. I had did a similar a similar path with Mrs. Mob with her system, where she only really just started playing games like Fortnite, to where she wasn't really a gamer. She's a student. She's a full-time student and educator. So she used her system, her PC, to do like lesson planning and researching different early ed curriculums and things like that. But yeah, you want to leave yourself with the ability to say either pass that value on down to somebody else, rather that be somebody you know, or you sell it on the used market, right? Which you could sell at 2600X in this example for about $100, $110. It will go rather fast, which would make that 5900X cost or 5600X cost what, 100, or sorry, $200, 240 maybe. It's a heck of an upgrade, right? Because I believe the 5600X is 299 at MSRP last time I checked, but still a very good way to use your your previous hardware. Absorb that value, get the most out of it, and pass that on down to the next person. Excuse me. In this case, it's somebody TMZ knows, obviously, but if it was somebody on the internet that say, you know what, I got an older graphics card, but I want to switch from to a newer platform, right? Maybe they are perfectly fine with their GTX 970 or their GTX 960 or their RX 570 or RX 580 or RX 480 or 470 or anywhere. It doesn't matter. Maybe they are content with their graphics card, but they want to upgrade to a modern platform, maybe to take advantage of newer instruction sets or a faster chip. So they have that option as well. But solid stuff, TMZ. Thanks for sharing. Now let's double back here because we were just getting ready to jump in and discuss the different form factors. And again, we had already established that for the sakes of this segment, we have already decided on the generation or the type of CPU that we're going to need. In this case, it's the Ryzen 5 3600. Ironically, we're like right in between the two generation CPUs we were just discussing with TMZ, the 2600X and the 5600X. 3600X, or just to say the 3600X, puts us right in between those two generations. So we know we have the Ryzen 5 3600X. We know that's the CPU we can get at a good value, at a decent price. What kind of motherboard or what chipset, more importantly, remember, decide on your chipset before deciding on your motherboard. Because if you know you need a 500 series chipset motherboard, then you know you are in the market for any 500 series manufacturer, whether that be Asus, MSI, ASRock. Um, you could find yourself in a position to where you can take your time deciding on the type of motherboard, but settle on the chipset in the CPU first, right? In our case, 3600X, 500 series chipset. We know those two will be compatible without a BIOS update. We know we have future upgrade room, right? To have a CPU that supports PCIe 4.0 or to support PCIe 4.0 storage and graphics, which technically in theory doubles the bandwidth between your PCIe lanes in theory, but you have that option should you be ready to upgrade. So we know we have those two things checked off, right? So you say, well, now, what type of motherboard should I get? Or when I say type, I more so mean what form factor should I get? Well, your form factors comes in essentially three main sizes, but we're going to include the fourth, but we're not going to really discuss, talk about EATX a great deal. It is a super enthusiast line. Um, EATX2 isn't always reserved to say just X299 and X399 motherboards. As you can see, you can have a beefier motherboard that still is on the consumer desktop platform, right? Like the MSI MPG Godlike series, right? Beefy motherboard, and the motherboard where it has the built-in water block. Those boards are considered EATX motherboard as they are slightly larger than your standard ATX motherboard. So you have mini ITX, micro ATX, ATX, and EATX. Now, a little bit of context. ATX simply is an acronym that just stands for Advanced Technology Extended Motherboard, right? It superseded the Baby AT design, which came before. We're not even going to talk about the Baby AT design. It's before me. It's before. Listen, it's a much older generation, but essentially ATX replaced the Baby AT design. The ATX layout rotated the CPU and memory, but in a nutshell, this allowed for more expansions to be plugged into the sockets. So we got more things like add-in cards and network cards and um, M.2 PCIe adapters, all those different things. Capture cards. It allowed for those connections, but these are the most common. These are the most relevant for gamers and creationists. You can There's I believe three or four other motherboard types. But again, we talk about games here in this community. We are a gaming community. So we're going to talk about the four that are typically reserved for gamers and enthusiasts. I don't want to leave out my enthusiast friends and fam. But EATX typically is reserved for Threadripper motherboards, which the biggest visual difference with EATX motherboards is that they have 8 memory slots, right, or 8 DIMM slots. Most standard ATX boards have 4. Some micro ATX boards have 4, but for the most part, many ITX boards you're limited to just 2 RAM slots. Now, EATX motherboards also are for Intel's X299 motherboards, and they offer similar features, but most importantly, they support, with their larger socket, they support higher core count enthusiast CPUs with, yes, on the X570, right, and B550, and even some B350 and B450 motherboards can support the 16 core 5950X. I'm not sure why one would want to do it, but previous generations, very few select motherboard vendors have the microcode available to support that 16 core CPU. But if you want to rock with a CPU that's higher than 16 cores over on the mainstream desktop platform with Ryzen, then you're going to be on the X390, X3 X390, y'all. Yeah, X399. I gotta take a swig on just on that one alone. But you're going to be on the EATX platform or form factor with Threadripper, which would put you in the category of, say, 18 and 32 and 64 core CPUs. Again, the larger socket, additional power to support all of those cores, and of course, on Intel side, their desktop CPUs only support up to 10 cores on their desktop platform. So if you want to go with anything higher over on Intel, you will find yourself on the X299 platform. I've always dreamed and do of. Let me switch back here really fast. This is important. I gotta get this off. But I've always wanted to do more X299 and X79 content here, as I want to get back at what made this channel so special, in my opinion, and how we started off. And I started off with just trying to help identify some of the value in the used market, and what you can and what performance you can expect from said used parts on the used market. And I want to get back to that. And I thought about jumping over into, X79 and X299 to see if there's any value left there. But with Ryzen and prices drop down so low, it's like, man, you could get more value by going with, say, a Ryzen 3600 or 5600 and a B450 motherboard or a B550 motherboard, saying it, as opposed to anything similarly configured on an X299 platform or an X79 platform, and the prices haven't really dropped yet to negate going with that platform on an older, memory format quite yet. So, but I did want to do a little bit more content on X299 and X79, as if there's any savings that can be applied in that category, and you're looking to maybe do casual gaming or casual content creation, because you could very much still achieve those things on those CPUs. A good rule of thumb, though, is to make sure the CPUs feature the newer instruction sets, which are pretty much good on the X299 chipset and X79 chipset, in terms of things like AVX 2.0, just to name a few. Bad Habit says, once you got mini ITX, or once you go mini ITX, you never go back. Especially now they are as powerful as ATX. That is true. Unless you want to expand in the future, but I am satisfied with MITX. Now, I'm not going to shed too much light on the project, because I want to reserve as much thrill and excitement the moment the video gets published. But the next few builds, if you will, or build series that I will cover, will be mini or small form factor builds. And man, the more and more I build around there, I come to appreciate the idea of a small form factor build, to where when we do my small form factor build series, I'm going to identify the pros and the cons and the pluses to having a small form factor build. But it is really neat, just the idea of having just as a powerful machine and a smaller package, say, as compared to a fully sized ATX motherboard. Which, if you're unfamiliar, will say, well, what would an EATX build look like? If you're new to the channel, and you haven't saw the and you didn't catch the Threadripper series, watch the Threadripper series that we built in like both parts, the OG, the story of OG Threadripper and the RTX 3090 series. Watch both of those because essentially that motherboard, the Asus Prime X399 motherboard, that is an EATX motherboard. And so if you want to see like how big it really is, you can watch where we built into the Cooler Master H500M, the beautiful, beautiful aluminum and glass case we used to build that system. Man, I love that case. It's one of my favorite cases. We talk about how much we love cases here in this community. Let me just get this off before we jump back into the motherboard discussion. But we talk about how much I love cases, and there's almost a case I always see that I admire, and I'm like, oh, I would love to either maybe build in that case, right, for somebody else, or um, have that case for myself at some point. But then I love the case that Snow White is in, and I just see no reason to to upgrade at least off at face value unless I see an upgraded version of this series, which I think was dropped, and I am like in the 4000D. But I'm like, it's a double-edged sword with me, fam. I like, appreciate the small form factor power that mini and micro ITX builds offer, but then I also like the just full size of a ATX build with the expanded PCIe, expanded DIMMs, full length motherboard, other features, beefy VRMs, although it could be had on high end micro and mini ITX motherboards, but it's just something about that, smaller package that still is, delivering a huge amount of performance, and it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I imagine so. Once you got a mini ITX build, you never go back. I mean, yeah, especially if you need to save space. Especially if you need to save space. Especially if you need to save space. I've run into a few issues though building a mini ITX build. Some you'll see in a few upcoming videos. But you got to keep rocking and rolling. And Spider Rule says, "Amen." There's a little bit of inside context there with Spider Rules 1993, and you all see why here soon. Probably, hopefully, and I'm not gonna say next week. I'm not even gonna say anything about it. It'll come. Just keep a lookout. You'll know it's coming. I'm talking about that video. Spider Rules got a little bit of inside context there, but Spider Rules says amen. Yeah, I bet. And Bad Habit says it's so easy to move around. You don't have to worry about carrying a full tower. Just love the convenience of MITX and the challenge to build a small form factor, bro. Fam, listen, Bad Habit. BH, it's definitely a challenge to build in a small form factor build. Yeah, absolutely. Because you don't have the full amount of space that's offered with, say, a full size desktop like ATX, but it's just a challenge, and challenges are meant to be overcome. They're not meant to stop you or impede you from completing your goal, or completing the OBJ, getting, hitting the completing the task, right? So if that's building your PC, it's just an obstacle, a challenge. I'm sorry, it's just a challenge, and challenges are overcomable. You can. Is that even a word? Overcomable? Don't quote me on that one. They'll be over on Twitter like Lab said overcome. But seriously though, challenges. It very much is a challenge, but you definitely can't ignore the convenience of being able to carry around a small form factor build. Again, I especially love the space. Like for a split second, I thought about reconfiguring my space around a smaller form factor build, but that was only because we were in the process of buying a home, and I didn't want to continue to invest too much in this setup. But I digress, because given how the pandemic has kind of shaken a lot of different markets, that's kind of been put on hold. But it's all good. It's all good, man. It's all good. We're going to keep the content rocking and rolling. I see we had a few new people join in. You just kind of came in the middle of a mini rant, but I do want to recommend that you hit the like button, and like just like we had a new subscriber in Swarmzy. Hopefully, this live stream I am educational and informative, entertaining enough to have earned your subscription. But we were talking about many ITX builds and small form factor builds, as that is the segment we are at also in this live stream, where we are discussing some of the different form factors you have to choose from. and we were just discussing mini ITX. There are a few members in the community that either have mini ITX builds themselves. Let's just yeah, they have mini ITX builds and they're loving it. They're right. They're telling you they loving it. They're sharing in their pros, the cons, the benefits, the challenge of building in a mini ITX case because you're limited on space and there's certain hardware configurations you have. You may need to get a smaller power supply unit, right? Or a specific, even because you do have small form factor SFX power supply units, but they come in different sizes, very much still, as there are different levels of mini and micro ITX cases. They come in different shapes and sizes. Now, a little on down this live stream, I was going to point out the fact that one thing I really like about mini and just MITX builds is the cases are some of the most unique and like some of the most unique cases in terms of that form factor compared to like ATX, which you see a lot of the same kind of rectangle or cube like designs. But when you have mini ITX, you have like vertical and like horizontal configurations you can go with, whether if you want more of like a console like box that you could put in your living room, right? Like on your TV stand or you somewhere in your room or on a desk, right? Like maybe you're limited to space. There are a lot of different MITX cases that you can pick from that look really, really incredible. Let me bring up PC Part Picker here really fast, and I tell you what, let's bring up a few examples. So that's the motherboard we were helping Swarmzy. Swarmzy said they were going to check in and work on that. They were supposed to let us know how they made out, but let's jump over here really fast, and I have to change the. Okay, I already did. All right. So let's go into our case, and we're going to change the form factor to MITX. Jump back here, mini ITX, micro ATX. We're not even going to include mini, but all right. Jump back here. Let's go back to our list, and oh, it didn't take. Yes, it did. All right. So some of my favorites here, I like, just like I mentioned, the Cooler Master Elite. It's like more of a horizontal like case. It's only $60. This is a little bit more accessible if you wanted a PC, say in your living room or somewhere that's limited in space, right? Um, Jump back here, or like this in-wind console here. I mean, look at that. I mean, that's pretty dope in my opinion. I like this case. It's expensive. What's up with that? It's a $200 mini ITX case, but still, I mean, this is a really interesting and unique looking case that you really couldn't get in a full ATX size variant, and it even has a small window. But I mean, wow, can we get the dimensions on this bad boy? Let's see. 357 millimeters by 224 millimeters by 273 millimeters. Wow. So yeah, it's a relatively really small case that you can still, install full size components in, right? Like I'm still talking about a fast CPU. You may be limited on your graphics card, which if let's add this case to point out, well, we didn't get any warnings. Oh, here we go. Okay, so this case comes with a built-in power supply unit. So just to point out to how small they can really get, as you can see, if you go with a case that has an integrated power supply, then that tells you right there that, hey, if you have an issue with the power supply, that may need to be a email to that manufacturer or to that vendor. But a lot of different cases I like in MITX. That's one of the benefits that I especially like with that form factor. But advancing on to that part of the conversation, I had also discussed, for those of you who just joined in, what ATX stands for. It just stands for Advanced Technology Extended Motherboard, and it's just an upgraded format over the baby AT design for modern boards. We were talking about how eATX motherboards are more so for your higher enthusiast based chip sockets, right? Like X399 and X299, or higher end motherboards that are designed for overclocking Intel CPUs, or like your 16 core and 12 core 5900X and 5950X respectively. Then you have ATX, which is the modern standard and essentially can be had for most configurations for under $150. Typically even slightly less than, slightly lower than that, because there are some X570 motherboards that can be picked up for between $120 to $130. It may not have some of the features you are looking for specifically, but it can be a good starting point to get you on a newer platform or a newer chipset. Now, ATX is typically the de facto standard and offers the most space for your plugs and your slots. Now, it's one of the reasons why if it was me, of course, as an enthusiast, and as a content creator and mini micro influencer, however one you want to put it, because uh, mini is smaller than micro, so I guess I'm a mini influencer, and I'm not even a micro influencer. I consider myself a micro influencer, but it's one of the reasons why I favor ATX full size boards, is right, and that's the expansion for more plugs and slots. But right, but you could go micro ATX if you wanted, say, for to have the extra plugs. But if it was me, or I'm sorry, extra slots. But if it was me, I would have two systems. I would have a full size ATX system, and I would also have a mini ITX or micro ATX system, just for portability. The case I have, it's still right underneath here. It's still in the box. It's still brand new in the box. I have that case. I like it because it's the Lian Li, and it has a handle where you can just pick it up and, like, carry it around. That's so convenient that that will likely be my future stream machine once we level up the live stream here and level in the content. We have a lot of really dope programming that's coming to the channel that I really can't wait to drop on y'all, and it's going to require some new hardware, right? But most importantly, I want something that's dedicated, as Snow White is although we have the core shredder in the lower portion of the lab, I don't use it. Shamefully enough, I don't use it as much. Only when I want to jump in and do some 4K gaming. It's essentially my 4K rig with the RTX 3090. But Snow White is a multi-use system. It's my editing system. It's my streaming system. It's my content creation system. It's my entertainment system. Here soon, I'm going to build a stream machine that just will be just that, right? Something that we can launch other programming, say our Twitch, because we are on Twitch. And if you are on Twitch, I might even occasionally do some IRL streams over there as I'm out and about and doing things. So, hey, if you're on Twitch and you want to follow me over there, it's Inside the Lab Streams. Um, Give me a follow over there. We got a few hundred people over there, but I haven't gone live enough for them, as I've like to, have the weekly live here be exclusive to YouTube. With anything we do over there will be exclusive over there. So I haven't really put it in front of the community over here, because I want to focus on YouTube, and I want to focus on this community first and foremost before we branch out and have say a Twitch following as well. But there is one built up over there. I'm just not active, but that could change. I will probably most likely start popping up and doing some IRL streams as I'm just like out. I think it was Friday. I was out at the grocery store with Mrs. Mod, and I was just in there streaming on Twitch, my experience in the grocery store, those kind of things. So if you want more of a IRL and more of a, like, personal, a day in a life of lab, you're going to want to follow me on Twitch, right? As we will have other live streams, and most importantly, our podcast, when that launches, will be curated over there. But don't worry, just stay subscribed to the vibes, and you will be notified of all of those changes when they come up. And I almost missed TMZ's comment, because TMZ says a little multimedia build for under the TV is pretty interesting, like a little NAS box. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great way, say, if you have young kids, to get them introduced to just using the PC as a platform, familiarizing themselves with the nuances of a platform, and just having a highly capable, as you mentioned, TMZ, highly capable multimedia device right there in the living room. That way, you're not reserved to, say, a desk or a table or, say, a bedroom. Maybe you want to enjoy some of those other features in your living room. I game on a controller. Sometimes I game on my keyboard and mouse, but for the most part, I game on a controller when I'm playing multiplayer games. So, being able in your living room, if you want that console-like experience, you could very much use a wireless controller and still just play your games and other wireless peripherals, say, like a headset, keyboard, and mouse, just to be able to navigate the Windows system. But jumping back over to the different size motherboards, again, we have EATX, ATX, Micro, and Mini. We were just discussing some of the benefits of an ATX motherboard. And I also want to point out that if you do not want to overclock an Intel chip, um, you want, or if you don't want PCI ports like 4.0, or if you don't care about PCIe 4.0, and you don't need a lot of ports, you could save, or if you want to overclock, I'm sorry, if you want to overclock. So again, on Intel, that's reserved for the Z chipset, right? Z400, 500, 300. If you want to overclock, those motherboards typically will run you a little higher than that lower tier, typically in the $150 plus range, as high as 200. Really depends on the motherboard's features, like does it have BIOS flashback? Does it have like decent VRMs? Does it have more than one M.2 slot? Other factors to take into consideration. Now, we were also discussing the up and coming popularity of small form factor builds using mini and micro ITX motherboards. Now, smaller motherboards typically means fewer slots and features. Micro, yes, being smaller. I'm sorry, mini being smaller than micro, as you can see here, to the far, that's my left, should be your right, I believe. But mini is smaller than micro, and you can use a smaller chassis with a micro or mini board, but you will have to settle for fewer PCIe slots, RAM slots, and other connectors. That's one of the reasons why, if it was me personally, and what I would recommend is say, hey, maybe have more than one system, or if one system is enough for you, still leave yourself with some level of upgradability, right? An upgrade path. You could still very much get a mini ITX Z400 series chipset or 500 series chipset. Overclocking could still very much prove to be difficult because you don't have a lot of space to deal with the extra heat that will be produced with an overclocked chip, because you will most likely be limited to either a 120 millimeter or typically a 120 millimeter or 140 millimeter single AIO if you want to go with a water cooled system, or like a 120 millimeter radiator or 140 millimeter radiator if you want to go with, say, a water cooled CPU on a block or a water cooled GPU, which then may be able to open up a pathway for overclocking a smaller form factor build, but still, you could be limited by your VRMs and other things if you wanted to overclock. Overclocking, I mean, I love overclocking. I don't do it as much because I don't think the community loves overclocking as much as I love overclocking, and I have to take into consideration the interest of the community first. But I do need to drop a community tab poll and see if the community at large would be interested in me doing overclocking content, or just continue to do it as I've been doing it, and that's just including it in, say, my reviews. Like when I did the 1650 Super review, I demonstrated its overclocking potential. Should you be interested in overclocking your graphics card? But it's something a lot of enthusiasts and gamers just aren't interested in doing. It is a very tedious process figuring out what GPU clock is stable, because that takes introducing increasing the sliders moderately as you're trying to find the overclock, not say going from plus 25 on the core and then you get a pass, you're like, oh man, okay, let me do plus 75 on the core, when all you really did is just makes that means it's plus 100 on the core now, and that's a heck of a jump without you testing stability. So overclocking can be a little tricky, but I do enjoy overclocking. I like the gamble, and I like the risk of seeing, how much more we can push the limitations of the hardware to extract more performance, more FPS. Now, typically you get better performance with overclocking your CPU versus your graphics card. I see it here. Overclocking your graphics card, like unless you're going for a Time Spy or Fire Strike record. I mean, overclocking your graphics card, if it's a newer graphics card, because GPU boost is so efficient, you're not really going to get that big of a performance uplift. Maybe like 5 to 6 frames on average at best. But if it's an older hardware, legacy hardware. Remember, we hate saying older around here, but if it's legacy hardware, then overclocking, say that 780 or 780 Ti, if you have the right power supply unit, could introduce a double-digit performance uplift, right? In terms of FPS. So if your graphics card struggling to maybe hit 60 FPS on average, maybe say it's at like 49 and 50 or 48 at the settings you like to play at, in the games you like to play at the resolution you like to play at. Maybe you can't hit that 60 hertz. Maybe overclocking your graphics card will maybe be able to put you closer to that 60 hertz, maybe say 55, 57, and depending on the hardware you are overclocking, could maybe put you over that 60. That way you're getting a much smoother experience, staying above or at your monitor's refresh rate. But yeah, gotta respect Mini ITX, right? Gotta respect Mini ITX. We're switching back over. I see we had a few more people jumped in, and we were just in the discussion of micro and mini ITX boards and some of the pros and cons to having one. Again, you know, huge space savers still pack just as much performance as its larger counterparts, but you will have to settle for fewer PCIe slots and RAM slots and other connectors among things. As you can see, it might be a little hard for you to point out with the mini ITX motherboard that you see here on the screen, but as you can see here, there's only one PCIe slot and two memory DIMMs compared to even the micro ATX board, and the ATX board offers a little bit more. But hey, if you don't need those extra lanes, then it doesn't even matter to you. You can go with the mini ITX build if it means having saving space, and maybe you like the smaller form, you like a smaller form factor case. Definitely an option for you to go with. If you say I'm not interested in say needing a network card, I'm going to go with a wired connection, which you should. I don't need a network card. I'm not going to need another GPU. I'm not running a capture card. You know, I don't need the extra PCIe lane. I can go with the mini ITX motherboard. But again, future proofing your system can be a little difficult, but keeping up with the future can be a little easier. So you can say, well, I'll opt in for a micro ATX motherboard in the event that I say want to upgrade to, if I want to upgrade my RAM, right? Like if I want to add more RAM, or if I want to add a network card, or if I want to add a audio card, or I want to add a capture card. You have that ability to where at face value maybe you don't need those things, but you want to save room in the future to add them. You have that ability. So small form factor builds, they're huge space savers. The cases, again, I like the cases. The cases are often unique to that form factor. You won't see, say, larger ATX format or larger ATX forms of some of the cases you see, and with a mini ITX form, a mini ITX case. But again, huge space savers. And I want to pull up another card here. As you can see, just to give you an idea to if you went with a larger case, because although it may look a little off-putting and weird to some, to say go with a really large case and a small form factor motherboard, you still could very much do it. But here's a illustration to give you an idea of, you know, each format and what that might look like in your motherboard, or say how much space it takes up in your motherboard, with mini ITX of course being the smallest, micro ATX slightly larger, ATX being the standard full size in this particular case, which I believe is the Thermaltake View 71, or yeah, I want to say it's the Thermaltake View 71. But it gives you an idea that this motherboard supports eATX motherboards. Not all cases supports eATX motherboards, but this particular case does. Supports all form factors, obviously, because it's so large. But again, just to give you an idea of what that may look like. And if you wanted to say, well, I don't like that case, I wanted to go with a different case, you very much could. Use tools like PC Part Picker will help you filter out the different sizes. But this chart too illustrates, you know, the size variance between eATX, ATX, micro ATX, and mini in inches to give you an idea. And also with this eATX motherboard, that is looks like an X399. That's an AMD motherboard. It looks like an X399 chipset, with the 8 memory DIMMs, 4 on each side, and then ATX with just your regular 4, and then micro ATX with 4, and then of course mini ITX with 2. Which even with mini ITX, you can go up to at least 64 gigabytes of RAM, which should be enough for most users. If you needed more than 64 gigabytes of RAM, you likely should have opted for an ATX motherboard, or maybe say a micro ATX motherboard that would afford a higher, a higher capacity of RAM. But as you can see here, different sizes and your motherboards, um, just to pick from. Is that for me? Oh boy. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I got a little distracted because evidently I had got a gift and it was presented to me. I'm nervous about things presented to me, but Mrs. Mod um, got me a gift. It's right here. Maybe we'll unbox it. We'll open it up at the end of the live show. We'll see what's in there. I don't know what's in there. All right. We'll get into that in a second. But it's my Father's Day gift. So shout out to Mrs. Mod. Thanks, Mrs. Mod. I lost track. Oh, that's so nice. I lost track of my train of thought here on the live stream. Um, Look at that. Awesome, awesome, awesome Father's Day gift round of celebration. Again, if I had my stream deck, we'd be playing a round of applause. Round of applause to Mrs. Mod hooking me up with the Father's Day gift and making me lose my train of thought. No, we were talking about different form factors you could pick from. EATX being reserved for enthusiast high core count chips on the X299 platform and the X399 platform, and then ATX, which is your standard form desktop. It's your standard form factor for desktop enthusiasts, like your Z490 chipset and B550, which also are available in mini and micro ITX as well, which are smaller motherboards for smaller form factor builds, which again will help you save on space, add a certain personality, because chances are the case that you pick to use with the mini ITX build isn't commonly, may not be as common to the community or to the industry at large. Say, for example, that you see a lot of Corsair cases, a lot of NZXT cases, but not a lot of small form factor builds. But hey, small form factor builds are starting to make a come up. So, but I did want to point out that at this stage, you want to make sure at this stage you should have already decided on your case, right? Speaking of your case, at this stage you should have already decided on your case, as that will further determine your PSU form factor, your GPU length, your cooler type, and even your RAM configuration. It's the crucial next step with upgrading or configuring your core foundation in this point, or this case being your motherboard and your CPU. And of course, your RAM is just as important. 16 is adequate for most gamers, with 32 being ample and enough for like streamers and gamers and content creators who say if you edit at 4K or if you're interested in editing at 4K, then you're going to want to say opt in for 32 gigabytes of RAM. Even if you're streaming at a higher resolution like 1440p or 4K, then you're going to want to target say at least 32 gigabytes of RAM. But it is the crucial next step with deciding on your core foundation, your CPU and your motherboard, and making sure you're getting the most value for your money out of both. Remember, you decide on your CPU architecture, family, socket type, excuse me, and then you make based off that decision, you decide on your motherboard's chipset. So if it's again a Ryzen 5 3600, then you know that you will either need X 500 series chipset or a B 500 series chipset, or with a BIOS update, more than likely a B400 series or X400 series chipset. If you want to go that route, you may need to update the BIOS. So there could be vendors in your area that offers that to you as a service, or it's something that you may need to try to a obstacle that you may need to try to tackle yourself, which could prove to be a financial one, because you will have to say buy a CPU to upgrade the motherboard, which then you might say, hey, I might as well just dial back and save a little bit of money and just buy a CPU that is compatible with that um, with that motherboard's chipset. And now, jumping over into our final thoughts, the wrap up, and then we'll jump in. We'll see what's inside the gift here from Mrs. Mott. But when it comes to buying a motherboard, it's not necessarily about how much money you have to spend, as much as it is about what your specific needs are, or what they're going to be, or what they may need be in the future, and even in the now, right? Like at the moment you are planning to build your system, rather that be you want to have it done in like 2 months or next week, or you wanted it done yesterday. And when it comes down to your motherboard, you have different sizes and different types of CPUs to choose from. But what's important, in my honest opinion, is finding the right one for you and your budget. This varies as each of our needs are exclusive to our own individual personalities. Remember how I mentioned that I like to play graphically demanding games, right? So I play at a higher resolution. So a graphics card that could power this resolution and refresh rate was important to me. I also create, I'm a content creator and I run a business. So having a machine that was fast and efficient and reliable was also important to me, right? So I wanted fast storage to be able to work in Adobe. I wanted, well, actually I need to up the memory, but for myself, 16 at the time was more than adequate because that was before I wanted to create content. I built Snow White without the desire to create content. It was just going to be a higher end machine that I was upgrading to at the time from a Ryzen 1800X. I did, scale back in cores, but it picked up in performance going with the eighth generation 8700K at the time, which was a faster offering. The 9900K hadn't yet come yet, or it just came out somewhere like that. Which there wasn't much value in the 9900K. The 9900K at about $300 now is an incredible valuable is it has incredible value for an 8-core 16-thread CPU that has a sufficient amount of IPC and also has high turbo frequencies and overclocker potential should you be interested in doing that. Again, if you're going to overclock, make sure you are investing into a beefy cooler, something to help you with maintaining that overclock. But again, this varies depending on each of our exclusive needs, right? Mrs. Mod is a student, not as a casual gamer. She doesn't need a fast graphics card. She uses a 750 Ti. She doesn't need a fast graphics card. She doesn't need a fast CPU, although she's using a 1600X. Which, if you want to see the story of where we built that video, it's older content, but it's just as relevant. And if any of you do hear like our returning quarter, I do believe you didn't see that video. If you watch it, tell me on that video when you watch it. It's the Wonder Woman rig video we did, and then we did the video where I had to replace the SSD and reinstall Windows because the SSD failed. But solid story nonetheless. But again, each of our needs are exclusive to our individual personalities and what we want to accomplish and achieve on our systems, right? Now, this is what makes the PC as a platform glorious, in my honest opinion. Each rig is built with the same parts but serves different needs. You know my argument about if we gave everybody $500, you can go buy a PS4 or a PS5, an Xbox Series S and X, we're all going to get the same performance. But if I gave us 5 different people $1,000 to build a PC, we will likely end up with different configurations. Or even if they are similar configurations, there's going to be a certain aspect about it that's going to reflect our personality. Whether that be a case, fans with RGB, a motherboard with RGB, a case with RGB, an AIO with RGB, a water cooler versus an air cooler, 32 gigabytes of RAM versus 16, mini ITX versus an ATX motherboard. You see what I'm saying now? Each one of our builds will be very much different and exclusive to our personality. When it comes to buying your motherboard or deciding on your motherboard, take into consideration your CPU generation, the socket type, and then the chipset. Make sure you are investing in a motherboard that necessarily isn't future proofed but will allow you to keep up with the future and with advancement in technologies, faster CPU, higher core count CPUs. Start with a lower cost to entry and save up and expand down the road should and when you see fit. Woo. Sorry, let me clear my throat. Man, I got a little tickled up because it's one of my favorite discussions. Again, helping as many people convert as many gamers over to this platform as possible. Making it easy and simplifying that process is part of my mission and my goal here as a content creator on this platform. Am I great at it? I'll let you, ladies and gentlemen, be the deciding factor on that. I will continue to work to get better with each video, with each live stream, right? With every bit of content I put out, I will continue to get better in delivering that content in a clear and consistent way that makes that journey or makes that transition easy for, gamers who are looking to ascend from consoles over onto the PC, or if you're willing, if you're able and you're prepared to say upgrade your graphics card or upgrade your core components, and maybe you have older hardware, maybe you had a system from 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and your case is fine, your power supply is fine, but you want to upgrade off of that FX series, or you want to upgrade from that Haswell CPU to a modern platform, and you only want to upgrade your motherboard, CPU, and memory, where should you start? It's my goal as a creator to help you answer that question. And if that's you right here, right now, and you're still here, or if you're here on the replay, hit me up over on Instagram or on Twitter, or right down here in the comment section below if you're on the replay, or right here in the live chat if you're here with us right now. I do want to get caught up in the chat here really fast, as Sparta Rules 1993 says, always pick your case first. Always pick your case first. You have to remember that when you build your PC, you're going to stare at that PC for maybe a couple years or longer, unless you're willing to upgrade soon. Yeah, I mean, picking your case. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with picking your case first. It's just that you should at least consider the motherboard you want to use for that case. And that is, if you want to go with a smaller form factor build, then doesn't matter what's going to come first, the chicken or the egg. You're going to want to make sure that you're buying a motherboard that's compatible with that case. If it's an ATX case, then it doesn't matter what motherboard you go with, right? Micro, mini, or ATX, it will be compatible. But if it's vice versa, and it's say a mini IT, say you like, hey, well, hold on, I really like this small case, or I don't have a lot of space. Maybe it's a factor that's out of your control, right? If it's a factor that's out of your control, then yeah, you should start there. If you don't have a lot of space, then you should start looking at a case first and foremost, and making sure that you have an upgrade path associated with that case. We talked about that, I believe, 2 live streams ago. Remember, Ant? We talked about just having a case that will allow you to expand your hardware, right? That's either adding more fans, or being able to add more storage devices, or upgrading to a beefier cooler, maybe an AIO. Maybe you're able to upgrade to a larger motherboard. Say your case supports the ATX motherboard. Um, you just want to make sure that you position yourself with enough upgrade, you position yourself with an upgrade path that will allow you to enhance your experience. But absolutely, Sparta Rules, consider picking your case first if space is an issue. But rather you start with case or motherboard, the two go hand in hand. You want to make sure your case will be compatible with your motherboard, but most importantly, at that same time, you want to make sure your motherboard will be compatible with your CPU. But yeah, all right. So that's that. Now, I did say that we were going to pop this open, so Mrs. Moderator, my wife, I am a daddy. Sometimes my kids will pop up onto the show, right? Uh, some of you might, I ain't gonna say their names, but I don't know if they want to put me on the spot, but some of them were here during this live stream today. There was a message that says a little something to start with. A little something to start with. To start with. Ooh, so maybe more than one gift. Is it a graphics card, y'all? If it's I hope not. If it's a graphics card, I mean not. Okay, we're not going to shake it too much if it's a graphics card. This says Happy Father's Day. Enjoy your gift from, and her name. This is mine. All right. Oh, that's so nice. All right. So, you guys know I am horrible at unboxings. I am not the best at it, and I'm concerned. I would look at her to see if I should even be unboxing this on the live. Okay, she gave me the thumbs up, so we're good. All right. So let me see. I'm not the best unboxer. Have y'all seen the RTX 3090 series? I'm not stalling either. This is no cap. Have y'all seen the RTX 3090 unboxing video I did, where I unboxed the RTX 3090? Wow, I struggled. I'm not a good unboxer. All right, so we got some paper for design, and oh, we got a box. All right, we got a box, so we'll pull it out. Live reaction. Let me see. And I could get it out. Okay, and wow. Okay. Mrs. Mod is trying to tell me my audio sucks, but this is dope, y'all. Wow. It's a condenser microphone. It's a podcasting microphone. The Razer Serene Mini, and it's white, so it matches Snow White's aesthetic, which I don't think was by accident or degree. Or I'm sorry, by accident. I think that was by purpose, but this is awesome. So it's a USB mic, so it's ultra compact and easy to port. You just plug it in, it's shock resistant. Um, this is the first step to the Inside the Lab podcast, which will be coming here pretty soon. So you all who are here on the live stream or here on the replay, I've seen it out. I've seen it out. I can't wait to rock with this microphone. I know audio is a constant struggle, and it's something that I will continue to try to improve. You all know the story of the audio with the first 50 to 60 videos we did here on the channel. Which should we do a double unboxing here? Should I open? No, I want to savor the moment. I'm not gonna open it yet. When it's time to open it, that's when we will be christening in the start of the podcast, I guess, if you will. But yeah, this is I'm concerned because Mrs. Ma said this is the start. This is just something to start off with. So maybe there's going to be more. I am taking off here the rest of the weekend to celebrate Father's Day, and this is an awesome gift. So shout out to Mrs. Mod. I would give her a little bit of PDA on the live, but I ain't gonna do it. We got to keep the content kid friendly. But that was very nice of Mrs. Mod. Oh man, I'm smiling, and it might be a little difficult, obviously, but I'm even blushing a little bit. Man, that's cool. I love when it's tech that's helpful that I didn't pick out or have any say in the buying decision. So, um, awesome stuff. Matches Snow White. I can just tell on the box alone, it just matches the overall black and white aesthetic of Snow White. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Can I give you a high five at least, Mrs. Mott? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, that's awesome. All right, so ooh, we talked about a lot of different things throughout this live show, and I want to reiterate if you just now joined us too, this live stream will be left up as is. Jump back into the conversation. I feel like this conversation probably could. There's more that could be added, and there's so much more we could talk about. But I did want to try to make sure I covered some of the areas that are often the most confusing when it comes to, say, building a gaming PC or getting into PC gaming, especially with trying to pair a compatible CPU with the right motherboard and knowing what features to look out for with that configuration, right? It could be a very challenging endeavor. So this live stream, my goal was to try to ease any of those misconceptions and misunderstandings one may have with, deciding on your motherboard or picking out your motherboard. If you are here on the replay and you've made it up to this point, or if you were here on the live and you still say lab, I still don't know what the heck to look for on the motherboard. You need to further elaborate and explain yourself. Fam, I would be more than happy and welcome to do so. If you have any questions about anything we discussed or talked about, or you even disagree with anything we discussed that I talked about in the live show, feel free to hit me up. Let me know. We can have constructive conversation down in the comment section below. Um, but yeah, in Sparta Rules, I just want to give you a little bit quick update because I did before the live stream. I saw your IG message, and yeah, everything's great. The new power supply unit fit in perfectly. I'm just wrapping up the cable management. I did have to make some changes though, given the size of the CPU cooler, which you will see in the video. But yeah, all good there. Should start testing. I don't want to say too much. I want to just save it for the video. The video's coming up, but obviously, I'll wrap up testing before I will wrap up the production of the video. But the video, guys and gals, video is going to be, man, whoo. When that one shows up, when that one pops up, I'm gonna really need the community to show up for that one. Like it's gonna be, I've put a lot of creative ingenuity into this video, into this production, and I can't wait to share it with the community when it drops. As I've already, I mean, it's in pre-production now. Or I guess it's in production now, you could say, and not so much pre-production, but from music to graphics to cinematography to scene, tones, settings, scene placement, all of those things. It's just going to be a bumpy ride. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But yeah, um, just let me. And now before we dip out, I do want to or before we do our housekeeping or house cleaning, what is it? Housekeeping in the beginning and house cleaning at the end. I do want to say hi to. Do want to give a shout out, to Sparta Rules 1993 Ant. Thanks for stopping by as always. Bad Habit as well. Thunder, who is one of my children. Thunder saying hello. The TMZ, the Mrs. Zombified, it was always good to see you as well. TMZ always showing up, showing support. Who else? We had Swarmzy, which Swarmzy was supposed to. Hopefully that helps Swarmzy out. I told Swarmzy to hit me up on Instagram or Twitter if that didn't help solve their problem and I can maybe help them. But Swarmzy didn't come back, so maybe it worked for him or maybe they still figuring it out. Either way, I hope to hear back from Swarmzy, and it was good to have you on, Swarmzy, along with Binks. Binks was also new. Binks said, "I like your setup." I might have missed that. No, I didn't miss that. Binks, if you're still watching, let us know. But I appreciate it. I mean, the setup is a little dated. We haven't done 50 live streams yet, and we haven't streamed for a year. But coming up in on August 5th will be the uh year anniversary from when we started this week, from when we started this show. Um, Now we may or may not be at 50 live streams by then. But if we are, we will likely do a live stream or a live show update in a live stream format to discuss the future of the show, as the aesthetic and the format, the structure, the technicalities, the technical difficulties, all of those things will either be overcome or I will just change the format of the show, make it a little bit more interesting. So, but yeah, Mrs. Mod, of course, and just Samson, who was here earlier. Ron Richards, a friend of mine, has stopped by. Just Samson. Who else? Let's see. Let's see. Okay, and Butterknife is another one of my kids. So it was great to have everybody on. I do appreciate you all. And before you go, I just want to do a quick, and I do mean quick, friends and fam. I do want to do a quick house cleaning. Again, if you haven't yet, jump down in the description box below or with the pinned comment right here in the chat. Sign up for our email list, right? It helps me keep a direct line of communication with you, the viewer, and you as a core member of this audience. Should this channel be compromised or we launch companion channels under this network, you will be the first to be notified and the first to subscribe, which would be awesome and great, of course. But most importantly, this helps you stay in the know in case social media notifications continue to be not as ideal as they are. This is a great way for you to be connected and informed about all things that are happening inside the lab. And you can get the invite to our community Discord, which our community Discord is growing. We have awesome teammates and community members who are just in there helping to add value to the conversation and to just overall kick it. It's an awesome place to be. We're talking about all things, not just PC gaming. So if you could be other things, pop culture, sports. So if you want the community Discord invite before it goes up behind a paywall, like channel memberships, sign up for our email address, as the invite links go out about once or twice a month and they expire about 7 to 14 days, I believe. But this, you can find this link down in the description box below. Let me see if Piper wants to make a cameo. Oh, look, my dog's in here too. But Piper, okay, he's not. Piper, do you want to say hi to the camera? No, you're uninterested. You just want to get up there next to Snow White. Do you want to say hi? They're looking at you. They're saying you be difficult. You know, you talk about being difficult. You don't. Okay. Piper said he made a guest appearance before, along with Thundercloud, who, if you remember, came up on board and knocked down Yoda and Obi-Wan. But there he goes. Now he's in the scene. Now he's just hanging out. All right. But sign up for our email list. It's free. You're always welcome to unsubscribe should I not be worthy enough to grace your precious inbox. All I need is your email address so I know where to send the content and your first name so we know what to call you. Now, we also have merch where if you want to take it a step further and support the channel, you can buy a sticker for as low as $4.99 or a hoodie as much as, close to $40 after taxes and shipping were applicable, or even a t-shirt for as low as $19 or a mug for as low as a cool, smooth $10, right? All premium quality clothing, heavily branded, and they are priced, in my opinion, they're affordable. My prices are lower than most creators, as you will see, as I really just want to make the merch accessible. But if you want to support the channel, this is one way to do it. The last being visiting our website, which is an extension of the content, features Core Shredder right there in an older format. Excuse me, before it was revamped during the RTX 3090 series. The traffic here really helps, again, push the message, get the content out to a wider audience, get the videos out to more people. You can learn more about me, visit the merch store, the history of the merch store, our community blog, check out the entire videography and all of the videos I've made public or all the videos that I've published here on the channel, and so much more. Really appreciate the channel that goes there. The traffic that goes there. And if you say missed the previous live stream and you want to know what it was about, or you want to know, say, hey, I want to catch last week's show, I had missed it, I had work, or I had much more important things to do other than hanging out with Inside the Lab, but I totally understand and respect that. You can always jump over to the website. The previous live show automatically is updated after the new one if you want to find it in an easy, convenient place, along with the most recently published video on the channel as well, which is the Doomsday Clock Future of PC Gaming video. I launched, I believe it was last week, complete with video chapters, and it's just an amazing, amazing video. So you're going to want to check that out when you get the chance. You can also find that link, I believe, down in the description box below. But all right, with that said, that is all for this one. I think it's time for the ride to slowly come to an end. I totally did not expect this. Again, shout out to Mrs. Mod for the early Father's Day gift, the Serene Razer Mini mic. This is an awesome looking mic and an awesome USB mic. I cannot wait to test it out, get the podcast rocking and rolling, continue the conversation in multiple different formats. Let me put it there where you lovely guys and gals can witness its beauty and glory. I've already did our end credit shout outs, already said hi, or post show shout outs. I will stick around as the end credits roll. If you haven't seen the end credits, I highly recommend you check those out. That too will change as the show format changes, but I will hang about and answer any questions anybody might have in the comment section below. Shout out to anybody who may still pop on and give them a little bit more context. Again, thanks for hanging out for this YouTube live stream. Okay, Butterknife says glad to be in today's stream. Yeah, BK all day, and I don't mean no, that's so cringe. But yeah, it was great. It was good to have you on, Butterknife. Absolutely. But all right, now again, I think the ride is slowly coming to an end. Check out the description box for ways you can support the channel. If you're here on the replay, as always, do let me know you made it this far into the live stream. I appreciate you hanging through what's an essentially longer than a Marvel movie on this glorious Saturday. I already did my shout outs to everyone, and I don't think I shouted you out, Butterknife, or I think I did, but shout out to Butterknife too. But I think I shouted at everybody. Again, shout out to Mrs. Mod for the Father's Day gift, for keeping the conversation fluent and going, and most importantly, helping me out during the content. Because yeah, this is essentially a one-man show, but when it comes down to getting like feedback on videos and other things that I haven't yet published and posted, I normally will show Mrs. Mod first. So it's just a great relationship we have there. But again, thanks for hanging out during this YouTube live show. Thanks for hanging out for our weekly live show. I do hope to catch you all in the next one, which will be next Saturday. And you never know, maybe a pop-up live stream thrown in there somewhere. So do be sure to, if you haven't yet, like this, give this stream a like, give this video a like. And if you haven't yet subscribed, if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, hopefully this live stream I was entertaining and educational enough to have earned your subscription. But I do hope to catch you all in the next one. So until then, be easy.